the central philosophy of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is, quote unquote, to leave no one behind.
Yeah, Washington. Beautiful, and so I tell them, hey, that's beautiful, when did you do it? 20 years ago or something like that. Yeah. Wow.
That's what you were looking for. Gee.
Acompañar a los líderes de las comunidades para Claro.
How you doing?
Hermano de Colombia.
Pues un gusto. Estamos ahí en contacto.
Claro.
This way. If you can't get through this way, third floor, you can also get through.
We should have tried this before you guys had the special. Nah, that's what delegate got me into.
Third floor.
I know.
There we go. I was waiting to see the grain. We'll get our 20 miles in.
Hey, Laura, so some guy went online today and said he called the secretary of the Sandhill, right? Said he called the secretary of the Sandhill and asked about me, and they said they never heard of me, and that I must be a Cherokee freedman.
Who the hell is the secretary of the Sandhill?
I'm asking you, do you know who the secretary of the Sandhill is?
There isn't any.
There isn't
I'm
any.
the government liaison. I'm the special ed education advocate, and I am the director.
Yeah.
This article.
So we don't have a
We don't have.
So
No,
who do you think he called?
I have no idea.
Probably made it up, right?
Yep.
I made it
Yeah.
up. Okay.
Australia has major initiatives underway in our priority areas, thus making progress depends on listening to people and communities.
What can we learn from each other's experiences? How do we ensure effective participation of indigenous peoples in the work of the United Nations system so that their voices are always heard? And crucially, how do we ensure that our national, regional, and global endeavors align with the objectives of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? Excellencies, the central philosophy of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is, quote unquote, to leave no one behind. To that end, it urges us to pay special attention to vulnerable communities, those who are most susceptible to being marginalized, left out, and indeed left back. We will have failed dismally to achieve the SDGs if we overlook the plight of indigenous peoples or neglect to uphold their rights and dignity, and moreover, to promote their well-being. Furthermore, we must acknowledge how these challenges intersect with the various gendered forms of discrimination and the barriers encountered especially by indigenous women and girls. Accordingly, not only must we ensure that indigenous women and girls are protected from violence, they must also be guaranteed equal access to quality education, healthcare, and economic resources, including land and natural resources. We have much to learn from indigenous peoples who have long proven themselves to be responsible custodians of the natural resources of the planet, and who thankfully preserve 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. For instance, the integration of traditional indigenous knowledge and innovations into agricultural and forestry practices can offer far-reaching benefits to us all, including combating climate change and food insecurity, and preventing desertification and land degradation. Building on the long-standing contribution to sustainability by indigenous communities around the world, we all have a collective responsibility to ensure our actions do not damage the ecosystems that the indigenous peoples in particular depend on, as do we. Excellencies, indigenous youth have also become increasingly proactive in asserting their rights and in addressing some of humanity's most urgent issues, including the existential threat posed by climate change. While actively supporting their endeavors, we must also recognize their distinct challenges. One such challenge of great significance is preserving their indigenous heritage, language, and knowledge, as inevitably they are caught in an unending struggle to navigate between modernity and tradition. To enable them to benefit from both worlds, we must readapt our educational curriculum to incorporate indigenous knowledge, celebrating our cultural diversity and our shared human heritage. Concurrently, we must also uphold the commitments we made at the General Assembly's launch of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages in 2022, highlighting the urgent need to preserve, revitalize, and promote Indigenous languages, given the rapid pace at which they are disappearing. Excellencies, this Wednesday, I will convene a high-level event to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples. I trust that the level of attendance will be robust. In line with the mandate given by the General Assembly, you may recall that I have appointed the permanent representatives of Canada and Peru to conduct consultations on the possible further measures necessary to enhance the participation of Indigenous peoples, representatives, and institutions in relevant United Nations meetings on issues affecting them. They will be assisted by two advisors representing you, the Indigenous peoples, who have been identified through the normal process and whose appointment I have recently announced. I have full confidence that with the support of the advisors, the co-facilitators will build on the progress achieved during previous sessions and the outcomes of the three hearings convened by my predecessors. There is no doubt that meaningful participation of Indigenous peoples in the work of the United Nations is necessary for the realization of sustainable development for all. You deserve to have your voices heard and indeed heeded. I therefore encourage you to actively engage in this process and trust that you will extend your full support and cooperation to the co-facilitators and advisors. I wish you fruitful discussions during this important and timely forum, as we also prepare for the Summit of the Future in September. I thank you.
Soldier, keep on marching on.
One of the things that we adopt specifically is that we don't go anywhere and complain about what's happening to us. That's not what we do. If there's something happening to us, we do something about it. So we come to the UN seeing what we can do to support the things that we've been doing about what happened to us. And because that's the position that the foreign nations have taken, we're taken a lot more seriously and given a lot more legitimacy.
In one of the busiest cities in the world, between iconic buildings and hot dog stands, sits the headquarters of an international organisation with one mission: world peace. I'm talking, of course, about the United Nations, or the UN for short. You've probably heard of it before.
Waiting on that morning sun. Soldier, keep on marching on.
Yeah, we here, UN. Families in the building.
Head in the dust, feet in the fire. Labor on that midnight wire. Listening for that angel choir. You got nowhere to run. Wanna take a drink of that promised land.
The UN first became a thing in 1945, just after the Second World War. The big Allied Four wanted to prevent another huge war from ever happening again. So they formed a new organisation designed to do just that.
San Francisco, California, a momentous conference begins. Here, leaders of the United Nations representing all but a fraction of the Earth's population, are laying the foundations of international security in the post-war world.
On the 25th of April 1945, 850 representatives from 50 countries met in what was, at the time, the largest international gathering ever. The end result was this, the United Nations Charter. It's a legally binding contract between all the countries involved and includes all the things the UN wants to achieve, like getting rid of poverty and disease, providing food and aid to those who need it, improving health services, disaster relief, protecting human rights, and making sure countries follow international laws.
First to sign is China.
On the 24th of July 1945, after a bunch of revisions, it was agreed upon and signed by all the countries involved. And a couple of months later, on the 24th of October, it came into force, the date we now mark as the UN's birthday.
1, 2, 3.
I was trying to say thank you, survivors, and I said spank you.
Oh.
It was really awkward.
I imagine that livened up the meeting.
No laughing. We needed a comic relief.
You have cards? Cards?
We do. Here.
Are we making our way to building 4?
I still gotta find building. Hold on.
Where do we
Watch this. Here, that way you can look stupid.
Okay.
The guy that
All right.
Where is he going? Why is he walking?
He's trying to find building 4. Yeah, so we're here at the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues at the United Nations. As you can see, we're here in traditional names. Got in with the tribal IDs and fauna IDs. We'll be here for a few days, and it's just a number of different forums and sessions, but it's really just tremendous networking opportunity. You see, we're meeting some of the Métis family. We met some family from the Haudenosaunee as well. Just a great opportunity to be networking and meeting other nations internationally. So, yeah, excited to be here, and much appreciation, Katapatus, to everyone that's tuning in and supporting the work that the Federation is doing. I hope.
We need to grant water human personification.
Why does Coca-Cola have human personification and not water, not a river? Yeah, it's absurd.
We all should go to New Zealand, go learn from the Maori about how they were able to do that.
I know just the king to take you to down.
They did.
Yeah.
I didn't know
Oh,
they
Yeah, so it was like a 30-year lawsuit. And it was led by the Maori.
Gotta wipe the dirt off of your hands. Careful, son, you got dreamers' plans, but it gets hard to stand. Soldier, keep on marching on. Head down till the work is done. Waiting on that morning sun. Soldier, keep on marching on. Quiet night, gonna wake the beast. Hide your soul out of his reach. Shiver to that broken beat. Dark into the heat.
What's happening really right now with U.S., Canada, and Australia, there's so much energy and momentum happening, but also these are the languages that are perhaps the most impacted by colonialism. You know, it's no coincidence that the former British colonial system had the most impact on languages. It was perhaps the most destructive of all of the formats and types of colonialism, in part because it created separation and otherness and left no room for integration and cooperation. And the result of that is these languages here are in the most difficult situation, where the average speaker is 75 We work with languages where the last speaker is passed on, from the languages we work with. And that's a very emotional, very difficult process for a community to get over. But there's so many languages that would like to see their language in books and in apps and so much. We're looking at over 6,000 languages that need this type of work moving forward, and so we're very again anxious to continue assisting and doing this kind of work. But there's we're really right now at the forefront of a wave of almost extinctions in the U.S., Canada, and Australia, and we want to make sure that we are able to handle these situations and these the linguistic challenges and all of that, and just end up being able to serve communities better in the years ahead.
And then I run a company outside of the work I do with the tribe called the Providence Cultural Equity Initiative, which is all around cultural equity, cultural development. And my chief creative officer is actually living in Boston right now. So if you're in Cambridge, I'd love to just pop up there, maybe.
Well, most of us are working remotely.
Absolutely. Well, Zoom or however, I just love to connect and learn more. And like I said, I've just been a fan of you all for a while.
Well, we wanted to make better ties with local tribes for sure. We know lots of folks that are American.
Yes.
But it's an individual.
Yes.
So,
I'll share. There are 5 Narragansett tribes right now. Only one of them's federally recognized.
yes,
So
that I know. Well, I know there's issues with all the.
yeah, I when it comes to the cultural stuff, I try to stay out of the politics of it because there's enough fighting. But the people are the people and the culture's the culture. So.
You got me on that?
Sí, por favor.
Over here?
So my daughter, she's a sophomore junior at URI, and she's always reaching out, asking for language. So we just came out of a fantastic workshop around language revitalization. What was really cool is they've actually created a Lakota dictionary, like a real deal dictionary. And so many of us speak different dialects of the quote-unquote Algonquian languages that we're interested in how we can do those same things. So I think that this is the importance of attending functions like this, other than taking pictures and, all of that sort of stuff. It's the networking and it's the obtaining knowledge on resources and supports that we can take to better our people. And that's why we keep encouraging everyone, get with your nation. We're at the United Nations because we got with our nations and they respect nations. And now we're able to connect with people who are leading language revitalization projects, who are interested, excited, and supported about what we're trying to do with our languages. So, yeah, man, it's a place to be.
Today, the United Nations consists of 193 countries and has accomplished a lot of the things it first set out to do.
The information desk and ask.
Fauna is an NGO and the tribe's IPO is connected to Fauna. Raina said, because we got 9 member nations, if everyone brought 10, that would be 90 from the tribes plus 10 from Fauna.
And then we would, hold on, we'll switch this over here.
Yes.
Right? I put this back up, and we get 15 for being the eco stockholder. That's how you, and you know how you speak from the floor? the amount of people you represent moves you up the list, and we get our time up there like Denmark did yesterday.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering, I have notes, I was like, how do you
And
get involved in the council itself?
well, here's the
How do you
thing.
guys get nominated for permanent seats?
And this is why I'm glad, because we're still coming out of this victim mentality. Oh, they're not letting us in. Oh, you showed up with 12 people. There's people here with 300 people, but we want to speak before them because we got. Exactly. Exactly.
Gotta show that.
Exactly.
Well, that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah, you know what?
Over at the UN, the Indigenous
Thank you. I wasn't. Yeah. They're so upright.
Mine sent this way.
Soldier, keep on marching on. Head down till the work is done. Waiting on that morning sun. And on. Head in the dust, feet in the fire. Labor on that midnight wire.
Daryl,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You have to,
I did a trade for my dad one time at Kennedy Plaza, like before COVID.
Oh, he did the art.
Yeah.
We're so small.
I'm walking up to the UN to get my credentials. I know that guy.
Yeah, man, we're all up
But I
in
know
here,
him from
brother.
Rhode Island. I'm like,
You
I'm
know
like,
Rhode Island.
I'm like, it's gonna be the wrong guy. And I'm like, no, it is. This guy just said, well, this is from the Narragansett.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Very good, very good. How did you see you here again, brother? We should definitely stay in touch and not. I mean, you ready to see?
Yeah, I know.
We just did an Oreto, the Taino family. We hosted an Oreto for them at our land. Yeah, you gotta come through,
And I
man.
was like, I didn't know.
27th, we're doing our planting moon social and a naming ceremony.
Were you on there? Like, is that? I can't remember who posted.
That was Turtlega, Tapi 101.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah. He's actually here.
Is he?
Yeah, he's up here with us. So we're all out here. But yeah, definitely come through and check us out if you're in the area, man. That's what we're doing it for.
Where I find it on his Facebook?
You can find it on here. You can also look up our tribe, Metropolitan Narragansett tribe.
Okay.
We'll post it on there as well. But Raymond L. Watson, shoot me a message for Two Hawks Says on IG.
All right. I will.
Yeah.
Are you guys going in?
Yeah, we just came up to say hi to our friend, and then we're gonna
I'm not participating in this one.
Okay. I'm gonna go and get my thing.
All right, very good.
The badge.
Very good. Yeah, there's the street there on the left.
They said, huh?
Yeah, up there on the left, you'll see it right there.
Yeah.
Nah,
All right.
and they're like if they
Address is 230.
they're super not helpful.
Yeah, not helpful.
They're super not helpful. I don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know. So you don't. Oh no, I do know what you're talking about. Okay, what else?
Ray, it's a ball, Ray.
So, one thing I'd like to mention is that, as I, been in college, I did several research papers on colonization, and this is a continuation of putting our men in prison, or women are being murdered, or children are being taken to DSS or whatever, adopted out. And there's money in that. I live in South Dakota, and they pay foster parents extra money, like a special needs child. So our fight is all about this whole circle of our life and our people. And one thing I can say about Leonard's case, that it's so gross, the misconduct that has happened, but we as Native people, we feel this every day, the inequities and the racism, Right in South Dakota, with the monument everybody talks about, Mount Rushmore. That was built by white supremacists, and it's worship to this day. So, that's what kind of climate we live in. I live in Rapid City. We call it racist city, okay? We have institutionalized racism at all levels. I mean, you hardly ever see Native people in any type of position beyond, cooks or janitors. So we're really still fighting. We have a lot of people that have come up to the movements. We have several organizations. And I'd just like to thank the Wombly Ska Society. We brought some representatives right here, Tara and her daughter, Kaylee, and they're coming up. So we want to include our youth, and they represent AIM Grassroots as a diplomat. So one of the things that I'd like to also talk about is the way the government has always attacked our people. And they don't care. When Wounded Knee 1890 came, mostly women and children and elders. And the same thing on June 26th in Oglala, Grandma Jumping Bull, that was her house. And it's not like they didn't know, because we had found evidence that we've been under surveillance during that time. They probably used a different word. They came in and attacked our camp. This was proven when Leonard's co-defendants, Bob Robinson and Dino Butler, were acquitted on the basis of self-defense. So we're all thinking, okay, so Leonard should come back. He was on the run then, and he should be acquitted too. You would think that the whole same thing, but no. This is where it started, by them using him as a scapegoat. They went to Canada, and ever since this began, they started lying. They went to the Canadian people or the courts, because that's where Leonard was at for an extradition hearing. And they abused a woman by the name of Myrtle Corbear. And she did 3 affidavits after they threatened her, that her life would end up like anime Avposh. Those are the words that they used against her. So abusing women, and it's just like from day number 1. Whenever we found out, when her affidavits were taken to the Canadian court, we're like, who's Myrtle? Everybody at the Jumping Bull, nobody knew her. She didn't know us. She didn't know Leonard, but she was his girlfriend in this paperwork. And that's how he was brought back from Canada. Straight up lies. The lies continue to date, everything about why he's sitting in there. I mean, there's been so many different changes, and I think Judge Sharp covers that legal part better. But, it's just ironic that it can continue for 47 years. Where's the justice? I think that by now, we should be in a world court. I mean, why are these crimes still being committed against our people? And he's just one example, because in South Dakota, 75% or more of the men's prison are Native people, Lakota Nation. Same with the women. Those numbers are way too high. So, and we're less than 15% at the most of the population. Why are we still suffering? So I'm just hoping that everybody here that, is part of an organization can just say free Peltier. What does that mean? That's a powerful word right there. And it's beyond him, it's about our people. It's about the continued genocide. And when you stand up for your human rights, like he did, and everybody else in the American Indian movement had already, that's what we do. We see something wrong, we try to address it in a positive way. So I just hoping that when you do your intervention. Oh, intervention. That you would just end it with free Peltier, or put it on your hat, your jacket, whatever. We have some bumper stickers there. You're welcome to have one. And I have some brochures from the International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee, and we've been in existence since this started. We've had several times when we were taken advantage of by the government. They took over a committee at different points in the past 47 years. And there's been attempts to date. So, we're just like a target, by our words. What are we saying? Nothing but the truth, and all they do is lie. When they tell you that, well, let me see, one more thing I'd like to mention is the recent report that came out by the United Nations Working Group on arbitrary detention. And that's a powerful document, but it took a long time to come out because we have so many, not only in South Dakota, but other tribes that are just in there just because of the color of their skin or their beliefs. You know, so every prisoner that's in federal prison, you know, they still should be treated as humans and have basic rights, you know, human rights. So when you see somebody in there and you just, you know, you need to find out what the truth is and why they're there, because a lot of times they just didn't have the right legal help, they're in the wrong state, they're in the wrong city, and a lot of them have mandatory sentencing, you know, from the reservations, you know. And that's really sad because there's a lot of different circumstances that should be talked about when they're sentenced. And I think that's kind of where I'll let Judge Sharp continue his part, but I'd just like to thank everybody for taking a moment and coming here, and we really appreciate each one of you, you know, thank you.
Leonard Peltier is in prison because he represents all of us indigenous people, bottom line. But that's why he's got to be there. And you know for a fact that my work that I'm doing, my name is Masat Singh, we have the International Council of First Nations. And my work is after the Dakota's board judge, okay? That's in the Vatican Library, because that's the prime example of the doctrine of discovery. In other words, that's a prime example of what they did. They burned all the sacred books, and that was life. And that's why they still have it in the Vatican Library, because they got our spirituality locked up, okay? And we need to fight for that. So I think that we put it together, like you said, Mexico, you know, Europe, you know, all the what we call Ayala, right? You know, Anahuac, Tehuantepec, the whole continent, you know, and in this stage, you're right. And we don't gotta wait for later. We gotta do it now. So there's a thing that we did one time, we called Kids in Cages. You might have heard of that, right? When they had the Kids in Cages. Well, guess what? From Kids in Cages, that's why they have Leonard in Cage, okay? In other words, the Pope is the person who can, okay? Now, but it's not a question of religion, nothing like that. But the doctrine of discovery is based on those bullas, on those type of bulls, okay? From 1452 particularly, all right? So we have to fight it, and we've been fighting the doctrine of discovery for 30 years. We didn't know where, but guess what? We're coming at it because they're in violation of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People because they have stolen property in the Vatican Library. Okay, and on the things that we ask the Pope to consider is that the Holy See is in violation, right? And that we ask is also we call for the liberation of Leonard Peltier, but like you said, as the first person that we're going to liberate from the prison, okay? We want to liberate all the older people, like myself, you know, all the older people that are there, that are no harm to nobody else, but themselves either, you know. In other words, he's got to be the first movement. So we're making a movement of liberating all the people out.
And by the way, the American Indian movement began 1492. When the first Taino Indio in the Caribbean area was killed, that's when the American Indian movement began. We helped officiate it 1968 for the record, for you to know.
Soldier, keep on marching on. Head down till the work is done. Waiting on that morning sun. Soldier, keep on marching on. Head in the dust, feet in the fire. Labor on that midnight wire. Listening for that angel choir. You got nowhere to run. You wanna take a drink of that promised land. Gotta wipe the dirt off of your hands. Careful son, you got dreamers plans, but it gets hard to stand. Soldier, keep on marching waiting on that morning sun, so to keep on marching on. Quiet night, gonna wake the beast. Hide your soul out of his reach. Shiver to that broken beat. Dark into the heat. Oh, 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 oh.
So we basically been here at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. It's an annual event that they have. It gives an opportunity for Indigenous nations from around the globe to come together, to network, to address different issues they're facing, to really interact with the United Nations and the different resources and arms that are there. So we came up, the Federation, just to make our presence known since we reconstituted a number of months ago, and just to do some networking and building. One of the things that we adopt specifically is that we don't go anywhere and complain about what's happening to us. That's not what we do. If there's something happening to us, we do something about it. So we come to the UN seeing what we can do to support the things that we've been doing about what happened to us. And because that's the position that the founding nations have taken, we're taken a lot more seriously and given a lot more legitimacy. So just some of the specific things that were really interesting this week. We had the opportunity to attend events, one dealing with a linguistics institution that deals with indigenous languages. So we talked to them about our revitalization efforts. We met with representatives from federal agencies that were interested in supporting and working with us. We met with individuals from foreign governments that were interested in working with us. It's really just a great space for nations that are sovereign to come and meet each other and meet people that you're not going to just meet. Like, you're not just bumping into people from the EPA somewhere, but they're here because they're looking to engage with indigenous nations.
Well, it's an opportunity to network between independent nations and entities that represent the interests for those independent parties that are looking to finance developments for their infrastructure or their media efforts or retainment and preservation of the language, issues that affect indigenous populations who are trying to retain their identity and their culture through colonization and through development, and the way that technological development affects those indigenous, societies. So it's been an opportunity to network. It's been an opportunity to build connections towards retaining our sovereignty in spite of the extra incursions on sovereignty that have to do with technology, and that this affects normal everyday individuals, but affects cultures and tribes in different ways, because it leads to the erosion of language and the erosion of their self-determination. So that's what this is about, and what it's been about for myself, making connections towards building the kind of structure for ourselves that will preserve and create our infrastructure, but an infrastructure that will allow us to retain our identities and build forward towards more self-sustainability, remedy, redress, repatriation, and retainment of our identities and our language. So, it's not the kind of thing that everyone can look at from the outside and see where the benefit lies. But if you understand culture and how societies evolve and retain their own identities, then you can understand what is being done here with these in the indigenous nations and their ventures, their books. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about recording our information, writing our books, retaining and preserving our language, and developing new ways forward to use our ancestral technology to be preserved through modern technology. So this is like the kind of stuff that we talk about in 10, 20, 50, 100-year increments. We break it up in steps and pieces by the things that we do today at these kinds of gatherings and these institutions and mechanisms. We build for the next 100 years. So it won't easily be interpreted always by laymen and folks that aren't necessarily in those arenas. But what happens from now is determined at these kinds of events for the future, for the next few years. So that's what we're doing. We planning in increments of years and developing our plans, thinking forward on how to develop our self-sustainability and build, remedy for the wrongs, redress for the situations that have happened, and repatriation for our
okay, the prime example of the darkness. In other words, that's a prime example. And that's why in the library.
Yeah. Tawa, Tagway, Tareku, Taikaraya.
Huh? We don't look the same, huh? I tell them to stay in their lane, huh? We too busy doing our thing, huh? But they call us so many names. They call us Negro and colored and black and mulatto and so many others. Tell us the slang was discovered, but we was born here and the slang is our mother. When it come to the woodlands, we run it. We've been chasing these buses for honest. They don't call us grandfather for nothing. If I'm just being totally honest.
That don't necessarily apply to them, or aren't understanding how they operate, making claims that don't necessarily apply to them, or aren't understanding how they operate within the bounds of jurisdiction within the U.S. So I mentioned 5, I'll repeat them again for those who were late. We have our federally recognized Native Americans, state recognized Native Americans, and of course I'm using that terminology because we know that once they engage in that process, have the U.S. or the state form that trust for them, they're now subject to the jurisdiction of the state or the feds, and that's the way it is. So that's why I'm using that terminology, Native American, not to say that they're the situation where they're not indigenous at all and they're just claiming it, but a lot of them, my family, the Narragansett Indian tribe, they're Indians, but they've gone and gotten federally recognized, so they're federally recognized Native Americans. So you have the federal and state. The classification that I think most of us probably fall under, especially if we're living in the city, which is the urban Indians, if you know to put yourself down as that and pursue that, and most of us don't. We literally finally didn't know it till a year and a half ago, and then we were like looking at the definitions, like, well, that's us, and the people we at Human Service were like, yeah, it's you. So we were like, so to the Sagamore's point, our ignorance, in part, has been what has been holding us back. Just lack of knowledge about what was going on, lack of knowledge of who we were, so unable to apply or pursue or obtain privileges, rights, whatever services that should be coming to us. So you have your urban Indians, the fourth being the misclassified or unidentified, the brothers and sisters who we argue with till we're blue in the face, the fact that there is no such thing as an African American, who will tell you that their grandmother or grandfather said this, but they know they're from Africa. And then when you start to engage in them, well, where in Africa, which one of your family members, no idea whatsoever. And then the fifth one, which is the newest one, and I think this is one that we should definitely at least have some dialogue around so that there's an understanding around it, the Indians not taxed, because that status is not going to apply to most Indians unless they're moving in the capacity of through a trust, a tribal trust established in the manner that we have. And this has nothing to do with the fact that Fonda did it. This is just our understanding of how the law operates. I don't remember the exact year, but the American Indian Citizenship Act pretty much conferred citizenship on all Indians. And because it's a commercial claim that's made, if you don't rebut it properly, which none of us did, it is what it is. So this is going to be specifically for Indians who are moving in the capacity that we've chosen to move in. And you don't have to be a member nation of Fonda to do it. It's just that that's the route that Fonda's decided to pursue. So I really want to at least get that thought out there that there are several different classifications of Indians, and people should be looking into what their classification is. Because if you're like me, if your family down on the res is telling you, yeah, we know who you are, but you're not on our rolls, so you're not a real Indian like we are, and you grow up in the city, and you grow up thinking you're going to be either misclassified or an urban Indian. What I would hate to see happen is people coming to this knowledge of this term Indian not taxed and run with it like I'm an Indian not taxed and jam themselves up because you're not actually an Indian not taxed. That's not the classification or the status that you're moving in. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know if anyone else from the executive committee has any thoughts or if anyone has any questions or comments about it.
Well, I guess the question I have is, are you aware of that terminology, Indians not taxed, used through the census?
Right. So for our purposes in the race question, it's about racial identity.
Right.
And so yeah, for us, an administrative status. So for instance, whether you are officially enrolled in a tribe or whether you are a paying member or whether you're any of those things is not something that the Census Bureau is responsible for. And part of that is because we know that tribes do things very differently. They have their own governing bodies, and one tribe it has different rules and constitutions and regulations that are very different from other tribes. And so that's not the federal government, it's not the Census Bureau's purview to be engaged in that, but it's all about racial classification, about how you identify racially.
We actually found that information through our research, through the census document that had that classification of Indians not taxed. And as such, that same line that I talked about, that family had no race indicated, at one point they're listed as Indians not taxed.
So I'm not sure what year or what decade that may have been, but since 1980, so 1977 standards. So I talk a lot about the 1997 standards. It's actually a revision from the 1977 standards. So anything prior to 1980 census, so even 1970 census on, things may have been very different about what the why certain races were collected, why certain races were not collected, and whether you were considered one way or the other.
Peace, mic check 1 2. Peace. What's good? Greetings to everybody. So I think I'm gonna save the rest of this video for a little later, if you don't mind. What I'm doing is we walking back through time. This is 2018, so it's a lot has changed since then, right? We've learned a lot more since then, right? But that was a meeting with the U.S. Census
Bureau that was initiated by Fauna to address the census and how people are able to classify themselves. Now, listening to our brother speak, you know, a lot of this has to do with perspective. So what perspective is Two Hawks speaking from? Who is in this meeting? So the people in this meeting are all people who identify as and who are part of tribal communities. So irregardless of what they look like, you know what I'm saying? They come from tribal backgrounds, descendants of tribal people. And the conversation is for people who, as Two Hawks said, you got to find what category you fit in. So I guess if like someone's just arbitrarily listening, they can somehow convey this as if this conversation is a conversation that was being had for general public. But you have to understand that this is a conversation that is being had with and directed to people, right, who not only have identified as being of indigenous ancestry, but actually participate in the culture, that are actually a part of the culture. This is why they're sitting in here having a meeting with these people. These are not just random people who now all of a sudden believe something and are chasing after it. Now, certain individuals invited to this meeting under the auspice that she was a social media advocate that was helping to spread the truth, you know. And that person was invited to the meeting. Not because they were viewed as someone from one of these communities, but because they were viewed as an ally, right? Someone who wanted to help us spread the word, someone who had a nice platform that could help get the word out. So if there are people who are coming from these backgrounds, you know what I mean? There's ways to go about accessing your community and the greater communities that your community will come from, right? So what am I saying without being insulting to people? I'm saying this is conversations were not conversations that were being had for general people. These are conversations that were being had for people who were of, from our perspective, mixed ancestry, okay? That's who we were speaking to. This meeting was about how do people of mixed ancestry identify on the census properly. So this is why Two Hawks is going through the different classifications of American Indians, you know what I mean, of which urban Indian is a classification. It's actually, you know what I mean? And if you look through the definition, many of us, when I say us, I'm just not saying general Black people in America. I'm saying many of us who come from these communities fall under the qualifications completely of what the urban Indian label would be. Now, if someone gets a hold of this information and wants to mistreat it and misteach it and miseducate people and speak on it from a general perspective, right, and play the role that, look at this man, he's a Black man, and look what he's saying, he's an Indian, and he's meeting with the census, and then you want to attach the agenda to it. This is how this misinformation starts to circulate, right? And then when we have to address the misinformation, now we become the enemies, and now we're trying to shut down and we're trying to hide everything. No, y'all butted yourselves into a conversation and didn't have the comprehension to understand if this conversation is about you or not. Now, if you say you have indigenous ancestry and you've gone to the lengths of showing it and proving it, not only to yourself, but to your community, then this conversation is you're more than welcome to this conversation. But if you're somebody who just decided one day that you have an agenda that you want to fill, these conversations ain't for you, because you're going to use them maliciously, which is what has been done for the past 6-7 years. This is 2018. And I had issues myself when I got there and I saw who had been invited. Because already at that point, I was suspicious of the person. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not the one to jump out and be, I mean, it's not for me to do until you encroach on my people and my legacy and my ancestry. That's when I have to speak up. So a picture is being painted, right? That people like myself, Two Hawks, we're somehow working against the people to keep them from achieving what it is they've set out. We're not trying to stop anybody from doing anything. Just do it right. That's it. Just do it right. Do it respectfully. At no point in time did I have to denounce another group. Now, did I have issues? Did I have beefs with other groups? Did other groups attack me? And I'm not talking about this social media groupings that we're caught up in. I'm talking about, have I been attacked for the past 10, 15 years by natives from different communities because they didn't believe I was being honest? Yes, I have. And guess what? I stood my square and I stayed true and came through all of that, right? But at no time did I have to rewrite history to prove who I am. I didn't have to say the slave trade didn't happen. I didn't have to say the Underground Railroad was fake. I didn't have to say the real Indian. I didn't have to say none of them things. All I had to do was stand on my family history, my community history. That's it. So now when we see other people having to rewrite history, having to tear things apart, and we know there was all types of conspiracies that took, we know there was people who conspired against others. We know about that. That's very well known. Inner fighting amongst tribes. We know how colonization split people up. We painfully know how that happened. All of our families have suffered from that. So to try to rewrite history and you're staring at the people who are descendants of that history, it's disingenuous. And then to try and make us out to be the ones that are the villains when we were the actual ones trying to bring this information to people back in as far back as 2012, and not from a third party perspective, from an actual lived historical perspective. Like, I got people trying to convince other people that we're working an agenda to steal people's legacy. Like, that's what people would actually say. They would actually say things like, Turtle Gang is working for the feds and this and that, when really, in all reality, right, this is the reality of Turtle Gang. See, they talk about all this other stuff. They want to slander me. They want to talk about some relationship I had. They want to talk about all these other things, right? But what they don't want to do is talk about us being at the UN. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about us, fauna, creating a way for people to properly identify themselves on the census. 2020 census allowed you to properly identify yourself, gave you over 200 space, whatever the case is, spacing to allow you to properly identify yourself, meaning if you got 7 different ethnicities in you, you now can write it down, right? Gave you an opportunity to properly identify yourself. That's what it did. That's all from the work that Fauna and Two Hawks. But how of a sudden is he now the enemy? Like, I don't understand this stuff. How is Turtle Gang the enemy when Turtle Gang's family is literally in court fighting over our burial grounds? Like, we're the ones being attacked by corporations trying to misuse our properties, our lands, our sacred lands. And somehow these people can actually put their mouths together to say this and that about us. So at some point we have to step up and clear some of this stuff up. Just it is what it is. Like, I don't understand why people don't have enough respect for themselves to truly address some of these issues. Stop letting people lie to them. So, Al Red Dog in the building. Peace, brother. So let me so Two Hawks will be with us in a moment. What's up, Indians? What's up? He'll be with us in a moment. So I want to share something. It's an old video, but just so people can understand. I know this stuff can get a little boring at times, right? It can get boring at times when you start dealing with digging into laws and historical, but so while people slander my family, this is what we're going through.
My name is Kent. I live on number 1 McMany Lane. I can't even say it half the time. It's kind of weird spelling. My property, I might be lot 11. My property's on the edge of that cemetery. When I first bought that house, there was a few graves back there, like a pauper's field. Since I've been there less than a year, hundreds of bodies have been buried back there. I watch a backhoe dig a hole, wrap a chain around a pine box, and just dump them in the ground. The odd thing is, I never see a minister, a priest, or a rabbi pray over those bodies. They're just dumped in the ground.
I'm just here to echo a lot of my neighbors and fellow residents, mainly about our concerns that we have. We don't have a lot of answers. Some facts, maybe some facts still need to be determined, but we have a lot of questions and concerns. This is our neighborhood. We've been good residents. We're behind the Stavola.
Greetings, Chief.
We deal with the noise. We deal with the routine. We've had that cemetery there. I believe it's a lot of local families, Civil War, some Native Americans back there. And it's been very dormant for 30 years. Now all of a sudden, we have trees coming down on a daily basis. We have bodies from New York City being buried. God knows where they're coming from, in our beautiful neighborhood behind where we live. And I think it's important for the township, the council, to let us know as residents as to whether or not you share those concerns, and if you're willing to put maybe the attorney that you have to work to maybe fight on our behalf. If it is a state matter, whether it's the Attorney General, whether it's the Cemetery Commission, whatever the case may be. Don't know. I don't pretend to know who has jurisdiction. All I know is every day we hear the chainsaws, there's digging, there's burying, there's trees coming. So we want to get your attention. And if I could just have a raise of hands, who's here for this issue? Thank you. I implore you to take action.
My address is 73 Apartment 1 Long Branch. I am a direct descendant of Cynthia Ruffin and John Brock in the cemetery. I've been out at the cemetery. I have called Tinton Falls Police, and they've come out there, and his workers were told to leave and to leave me in peace because they come harassing me while I'm out there visiting the grave. At the time, I also had a order to show cause against Louis Schickley's the judgment was done July 1st of 2022. We don't want Mr. Schicklese on our property. We never have. Our property has been in Eatontown, New Jersey since 1774. I lost my daughter in May of last year. My sisters, my brother, my grandparents, great-grandparents are buried at that cemetery. And I had to bury my daughter on another cemetery because of the mess going on with Louis Schicklese. Is it historic? Yes, we know all about that. We want to preserve it and make it historic. And we want graves for the rest of our family, not just us, the Rocks, the Reeves, the Bowles, everyone that came from out there. So trust and believe. That is my family heritage. I would not want nothing more in my family but to put our people in mausoleums and make that a historic place back there for all to come and know where the Indians came from and the blueberries and the strawberries that were grown in Monmouth County. Okay? So enough of Mr. Louis Schicklese.
Said the sound's not working. I don't know why the sound's not working. But anyway, so we got Two Hawks will be in a couple minutes. I just want to show you some videos. So we so this is my cousin Carrie Jones. She's actually spearheading the case now. Now, what you're seeing is a burial ground. Originally, it was a Lenape burial ground. I don't know why the sound for that video wasn't working. That's crazy. So what you're seeing here is our family burial ground. Now, it originally started as obviously a Lenape burial ground. There's native burials there. There are also burials of the local families. Now, what they don't tell you is that these local families are descendants of the Indians. They're just the mixed descendants. So they were labeled as African American, Black, but the point is it's all one family. So all the graves that you see in this video, all these people are family. They're all my family, different lines of the family. So World War I and II, Civil War veterans. It's a historic graveyard. So we have Bowles, Dorothy Bowles, who's a great great granddaughter of Chief Bowles. So my family is. So let me just pause that again. But this is so, and because of the climate we in, this is something that we have to keep, and we hate that we have to keep saying this to remind people. But listen, we are absolutely Afro-Indigenous mixed natives. And though we recognize that the Indians in the past were much darker than how they appear now, you could say that about everybody in the world. It doesn't change that they're who they are. And we're descendants of them. My group is seen as a multi-ethnic band of the Delaware. That's how we've always been, right? Since I can remember, we were intermixing early 1700s. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have our story, we have our information, we know exactly who we are and how we came to be. So this is why I said earlier, I was saying in this little documentary short we have, that genetics, you can go run and get your genetics done, but you got to find out your story. You got to find out how you connect. So if you claiming to be a part of these indigenous nations, you have to be able to show how you connect. You know what I'm saying? And it's one thing to say how you connect. It's another thing to say how your community connects. So many of us out here on the East, it's not just that our communities are parts of greater communities. Now, how we lost our status, all these things, that has a lot to do with all the stuff that people complain about, right? Racism and politics. Yeah, we don't deny that. You know what I mean? But what we're trying to say is that without discouraging other people, you have to be able to tell your part of this story. You cannot prove you are somebody by casting doubt on other people. You have to be able to walk your line and tell where your people, how they came to be, whatever the case may be. Now, if you're the original Indian, well, then you should be able to tell that story seamlessly. The problem is people are making claims that they cannot validate, partially because they're not true. And when we say that to people now, we become the enemy. This umbrella concept that we can start dismantling history, it's not going to work. And at some point, when these people get to a point where their voices become loud enough, they're going to realize they are engaging in what is called indigenous erasure. And because y'all don't have actual relationships with these people, right? Okay, our brother's here. Because you don't have relationships with these people, you don't know how serious it is. So at this point, I want to bring Chief Two Hawks up and definitely start getting into this conversation.
Prior to 19 way.
Hold up. Queen Ganau.
Hey, Rick Wilson, cuz. Rick Wilson, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How you feeling? Everything good?
Yeah. We alive and breathing, brother.
Okay, good to see. So my right now my Wi-Fi, since I had the house redone, we just had the house redone. We had the Wi-Fi removed from one room, from one room to the other. So if you want to go to if you just want to take off your camera, that's fine.
Okay. Let me do that right now.
All right.
How's that?
Yeah.
All
That's
right,
good.
baby.
Yeah, I think the people know exactly who we are. We don't gotta, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's good to have you. First, let me ask you, how was the weekend ceremony?
Oh, it was good. It rained a whole bunch up here. So the pond, the space where we usually hold it at, is very flooded. So we had to move it up behind the house. And then it was raining in the earlier time. So it wasn't as well attended as it usually is, but it was still a good attendance. We definitely held ceremony. So, always a pleasure to celebrate Planting Moon.
Absolutely, yeah. Silent Hawk, he really wanted to get up there. He was contemplating driving up. Yeah. I caught a stomach virus this weekend.
Oh man.
Yeah. Like had me down for about 3 to 4. This is like probably the 4th day. I'm over it now, but I got I'm still being careful and things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But so yeah, I just wanted to definitely check in with you. It's been a minute since we talked. Family good?
Yeah. Everyone's good. Everything's solid, man. No point in complaining anyway. You just got to get up and fix it, right?
Absolutely. So
hey, peace to the chat. Peace to the chat. Aquani, everyone. Hope everyone's day is going well.
So this conversation, this topic that we are dealing with right now, I prefer not to. I guess people can be offended by being addressed, you know what I'm saying? And then it turns into slanders being thrown back and forth. I really don't want to get into that. I'm sure you don't, but we definitely want to clarify some of this confusion.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to turn the platform over to you, allow you to, just edify the people a little bit on what the conversation is.
Yeah. So, I think a lot of it has to do, I did a video on the Fauna YouTube page a couple months ago, but I think a lot of it has to do with this misunderstanding about what a Native American is and what an American Indian is. And I think that the issue is people are associating racial and phenotypical aspects to the terms when they're really just political statuses. It has nothing to do with your phenotype. It has nothing to do with how you look. It has nothing to do with your skin tone. It has nothing to do with that. They're political statuses.
So basically you're addressing the fact that people are saying that the Black Americans are American Indians and the so-called Mongolian Siberians are the Native Americans.
Yeah, and that makes absolutely no sense. Once again, and this is why I'm kind of baffled by it. So many people will speak about the fact that the first Native Americans were the English, who were fighting against the Irish immigrants who were coming here, and also were fighting against the Indians.
Yeah,
So
that's where you get the Native American Party.
the Native American Party, which was eventually the Know Nothing Party. So if the first
Yes.
Native Americans were English, how can they then be quote unquote Mongoloids? I don't quite get how you can understand that history and then get over to here and make it a racial thing. Beyond that, with the Snyder Act of 1924, the Indian Citizenship Act, all Indians are U.S. citizens now. So they're not outside of U.S. jurisdiction, they're within it. If you've got a birth certificate and you claim to be an Indian, then you're technically a Native American. That is your political status. I heard you touch base on it, and I just want to confirm, unless you are in some sort of dual citizenship status, and for us it's actually nationals because we're by blood from our tribal nations. We're not citizens of the tribal nation, we're nationals of it. Unless you have that dual status, then you're nothing but a Native American. It has nothing to do with your ancestry. It's very similar to someone who's here who's an Italian American or an Irish American or a Nigerian American. If they don't have any sort of official relationship with Ireland or Italy or Nigeria, then they're just Americans. And they're an Irish American, or they're an Italian American, or a Nigerian American. They're not a quote unquote Nigerian from a political standpoint because they have no relationship with the nation of Nigeria. They have Nigerian.
They just have the ancestry.
They have the ancestry, but their political and legal status is not going to be nothing more than a U.S. citizen. They couldn't go over to Italy and say, well, I have Italian ancestry, therefore you all have. Italy's going to say, well, are you an Italian citizen or an Italian national? And if you say no, they're going to say, well, where do you have citizenship at or nationality at? And you're going to say, well, in the U.S. And they're going to say, okay, well, you're a U.S. citizen then. You might have some Italian ancestry, but if you come here and visit, you need to be out of the country on the same date as any other U.S. citizen. You are subject to the same laws and regulations as any other U.S. citizen would be. You know, you're a U.S. citizen. So the same thing goes with having ancestry from an Indian tribe. If you don't have a formal or official relationship with any Indian tribe, then the only status you have lawfully is that of a U.S. citizen. And you're a Native American. You know, it doesn't matter what your ancestry are. The political status you have is Native American. And what we should look at, terms like American Indian or Native American, as political statuses, we should look at them in the same regard that we look at statuses like a foreign national or an immigrant. There's no phenotypical, look to an immigrant. There's no phenotypical look to a foreign national. That is a status that people have. You have foreign national. If you're from Canada and you're in the U.S., you're a foreign national. If you're from Mexico and you're in the U.S., you're a foreign national. If you're from England and you're in the U.S., you're a foreign national. If you're from Ghana and you're in the U.S., you're a foreign national. So it has nothing to do with your phenotype. And the same thing with American Indian / Native American. It's a political status based upon who you are, the ancestry you have, but really what your relationship is with the United States of America.
So it is safe to say that the whole concept of there being two different groups of people and that American Indians are the original, because the logic they use is that they want to do everything they want to play with the definitions when they apply, and then they want to remove them and discount them. So native states someone born in the land, right?
Natural born subject or citizen.
Yeah. So an aboriginal is someone who they say comes from the soil. So to make their claim on being Indians without having to prove what nation they come from, they want to rewrite history completely and say they are the American Indians who are the aboriginals that come from the soil, and Native Americans are the people who migrated here.
Well, but see, the issue with that is aboriginal in terms of who are you comparing yourself to be aboriginal to? If it's the colonial powers, then anyone who was here before the colonial powers would be aboriginal to these lands.
Thank you. Thank
so
you.
Once again, it's nothing to do with a phenotype. It's about where your ancestors were when Europeans arrived here, because that's the only reason we even have this discussion, because we're doing it in relation to a Euro-colonial society. So if we look at the tribes that they want to call Mongoloids, and they've been here for, let's just go low and say 5,000 years. Let's go lower. Let's say 3,000 years. They are considered aboriginal to these lands because they were here before the Europeans got here. Doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter if it was 200 years before they got here. If they were here before Europeans landed here legally, they're going to be considered aboriginal. So once again, you can't ascribe phenotype to these political terms. That's where the confusion's coming in. They're taking a political term. And
now hold up, before we move on, let me just say this, because I'm learning you got to be real careful with them. So you use 3,000 years as a low number, just for an example, but the truth is 30,000.
Yeah,
we agree on that.
My people,
30,000 and probably more.
Yeah, if you look right on the federally recognized Narragansett Indian Tribes website, they will tell you that archaeological history shows that we've been here for 30,000 years.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to clear that up, because you know these people are real slick with how they interpret information. You know what I mean? So just so we can cover that.
So then the other issue is this, and this is the point that I've been hearing you make, and I reiterated: if you don't have a formal relationship with an Indian tribe, then you're just a Native American. It doesn't matter what your ancestry is. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what history you found, because it's a political status. So if you don't have a political relationship with, that's again, right? If you don't have a formal political relationship with one of these nations, then you're just a Native American. Like that's all it is in the eyes of the law, because it's the nations themselves that predate the U.S. None of us were here before the U.S. None of us alive today breathing were here in 1776, before 1776. Yeah. So if you weren't here before 1776, you have no business claiming to have been here before the U.S. You're claiming that your ancestors were here before the U.S., but then your ancestors were a part of a separate body politic, which this system calls an Indian tribe, which were really just different groups of people that when Europeans arrived here, they recognized were here before the Europeans arrived. So because they were here before the Europeans arrived, these tribal nations, they were called Indian tribes. And then if you were a member or technically a national of one of these Indian tribes, you were considered an Indian. Now, what's really interesting to me is a lot of them will quote from Verrazano and his visits down into South Carolina and all that to talk about how dark-skinned the Indians were and what their phenotype looked like, this, that, and the other. But then they'll skip what Verrazano said about our people up here. And this was on the same trip in the same journals. Yep. And in Arch, when he got to up here, he said that we ranged in skin tone from fair skin like Europeans to a tawny brown. So if this is the same trip that he's making, and he's describing and certain people being very dark skinned, then he gets up into another area and he says they're very light skinned, almost like Europeans. How do you then say that the original quote unquote Indian had this specific particular look based off of this particular person, when this person is saying when they got up into this region, the people up here looked like this? So to your point, you can't cherry pick and you can't ascribe what you want to view as what an Indian looks like to everyone, primarily because that's what happened to exclude a lot of Indians from their heritage. Europeans said, well, if you don't look like this, then you're not an actual Indian. So it seems like all people are doing is just remixing and reapplying the same colonial concepts that they say strip them of their heritage to apply it to other people. And that's just a form of internalized colonization, because you're not going off of who people actually are. You're going off of what you think people are supposed to look like. And that's colonized behavior. Now, the other issue with that is there's a lot of folks who are in these circles, many of them the most vocal, who haven't found an Indian ancestor at all. Haven't found an Indian ancestor at all, but are now positioning themselves to speak on behalf of the Indians. And if you haven't found an Indian ancestor, but you have found Europeans, but you have found people that were enslaved where Africans were enslaved at, why is it that you're overlooking the heritage that you actually have substantiated to claim something based upon what you want to believe, or based upon what you read about people that you're not related to? That's a lot of like foolishness that's going on as well, and that needs to be cleared up too. You're not an Indian because you claim you look like something. That's not how that works. You're an Indian because you're blood related to these people that were here before Europeans arrived. Regardless of what you look like now, if your blood goes back to what these people, who these people were before Europeans arrived here, you're an Indian, but your political status is a Native American if you do not have any formal relationships with an Indian tribe. Outside of an Indian tribe, you're just a U.S. citizen and a Native American. There's no formal getting together with others who were disenfranchised and saying, well, we're good because you're a band, and bands are not tribes and they're not nations, they're bands. And bands are usually because they're either not accepted by the tribe or the nation, or their tribe or their nation was decimated and now they're banding together. But it's not the same legal weight or authority as a tribe or a nation. And once again, a band does not remove your status as a Native American.
Absolutely. And and I'm a part of a band.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I don't have no issue with that. I understand the historical ramifications of what happened to my people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And why we became a band. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. And see, I can understand these things and not be offended when you say this, because I understand the story, because I'm a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Where other people might be like, what do you mean? You know what I'm saying? And so something else I wanted to just ask you real quick. Who is it appropriate for you to speak on and teach about?
My people.
Beyond that?
I'm really a student, and I can really only speak to what those people say about themselves. I'm not in a position to, like, for example, Pokanokets. So I have Pokanoket blood, but I'm not a Pokanoket. I'm a Narragansett. And I think that this is another, I want to clear this up. It's okay to have multiple heritages, but who are you? It's the same thing if, I'm from Rhode Island, but my father's people are from Georgia. Got some other family in Mississippi. So if you ask me who I am, I'm not going to say, oh, I'm a Georgian, Mississippian, Rhode Islander. So I'm a Rhode Islander. This is where I'm at. This is, same thing with when you're doing your tribal stuff. It's okay to acknowledge, but you should have the nation that you're identifying with so that people know how to associate you. So to bring it back, I'm a Narragansett, but I have Pokanoket blood. But that doesn't give me any right to speak on behalf of the Pokanoket without their permission and without their blessing. So when you hear me speaking on behalf of Pokanokets, Sandhills, Kiskiaks, it's because I have the blessing and the permission of the chiefs to be able to speak upon the history and the experience that they've shared with me. And that's where my authority ends. I don't have the right to speak on behalf of people that I haven't made any formal connection with, that I don't have any ties to. And most certainly not because I read somewhere from a European writing something and now I want to present myself as an expert. Once again, what's different than when the Europeans do that? Why is it bad when Europeans do it, but it's okay when you do it?
Mm-hmm.
You're not those people. And being an Indian doesn't make you a part of this amorphous group of people that you can now, that's like being a Black American or an African American. It's that same mindset. Indians are specific body politics, specific nations or tribes that inhabit specific territories that have vastly different histories and cultures and experience with this thing called Euro colonization. But they're not all the same. They're not all the same people. A lot of them weren't getting along when Europeans arrived. So the notion that you can now speak on behalf of all of them because you were misclassified, that's just a falsehood. And that's going to do nothing but cause issues and problems for the people who you're speaking on behalf of without their permission.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you this. If right now the United States of America created a new form of record keeping, right?
Yeah.
Whoever created something brand new and then went around to everybody's home, interviewed the people to get their information, right? Came to your house and interviewed you, got your information on your family, and then they went back to their building in their hall and they created documents that were all false and put them in their computer.
Yeah.
Would that strip you of your knowledge? Would your family cease to exist in the real world or only on paper?
No, only on paper. See, what happened was a lot of folks who have Indian ancestry, it was presented with, you can be absorbed into the larger community and society as a Negro, or you can stay on these reservations where we placed all the Indians, where you can't leave, where they're terrorizing you because you have land claims. And a lot of people made the decision to go be Negroes. So it wasn't anything, if you have it and you don't know it, it wasn't anything of it being stripped from you. Family members made the decision to go and assimilate.
Look, my grandfather refused. He didn't allow any of that talk in his home because he said it would just hold us back and make life harder for us. My uncle is the one that talked about it openly, but my grandfather refused. He didn't want that conversation in the house. Brotherton could not be mentioned in my grandmother's house. See what I'm saying? That wasn't nobody stripping of us of the information. That was our elders thinking they doing something to give us a better chance to succeed. And that's a part of the story that these people are ignoring as well when they sit up here and say somebody stole their identity and the United States conspired with some Siberians to give them our identity. That shit sounds like some James Bond stuff. But let me get back to, let me get back.
My question is, well, what actual facts do you have that happened to you? Because you can't tell me, if I'm up here in Rhode Island, you can't tell me, well, this happened to Indians in Virginia, so that means in Rhode Island. No, it doesn't mean that at all. We have a specific history here in Rhode Island. My people literally were detribalized, with Rhode Island saying that we had too much Negro blood to be real Indians because we took in a lot of African slaves. We intermarried with a lot of different other nationalities and cultures through assimilation, but we maintained our culture. We maintained our beliefs, our traditions, all of that. We maintained our land. Now, it blows my mind. If my people were literally detribalized by the state, but we retained our traditions and our cultures, isn't that essentially what everyone is saying happened to them? And if that's the case, then why didn't you all retain your knowledge and your culture like we did here? Other nations, like our Delaware family, got moved off their land all the way to Oklahoma, and they retained their knowledge and their traditions and their cultures. So the question becomes, if you can point to Indian tribes and particular groups of people that were actually had these things documented happen to them, the U.S. conspired against them, the state conspired against them, and then you can see that there are these people who, despite going through that, historical fact proving it, still retained. A, why can't you find the historical fact that shows that happened to your specific people? And B, why weren't you able to retain your cultural knowledge and heritage like these other people did? That generic conversation don't really go nowhere with me as a Narragansett, because everything they're claiming happened to their people, who they haven't told us who their people is, happened to my people.
Documented. And they try to use what happened to you to bolster their case.
And then they'll be putting up people up there that I know are mixed Indians, mixed with Cape Verdean, mixed with, but they're mixed Indians, and they'll point to them and say, these are the Negro Indians. And I'll say, well, yeah, because we're mixed with a lot of us African heritage, some of us European heritage, all different types. There's a lot of Cape Verdeans up in this space. They were here from a very early point in the start of the American society. And we intermarried with a lot of them. So a lot of our people have Cape Verdean heritage as well. A lot of our people intermarried with quote unquote Negroes when they moved up here from down south during during that time period. So a lot of us are mixed. But the thing is, we still have that Narragansett blood in us. We still keep up the traditions. We still keep up the culture. We still practice the language. We have the oldest recorded powwow on record. So you're not going to tell me I'm not an Narragansett. I could care less about what you think I look like. I know my family lines. We got the culture. We got the traditions, like you were just asking me, cuz we were just celebrating Planting Moon this past weekend. For the rest of these folks, why don't you have all of that? Even if that happened to you, why don't you have any of that? And if you're going to tell me that what my people went through something less traumatic and less drastic than your people did, I'm going to be insulted by that, because no, we didn't. And then if you're going to say to me, well, there was more effective to just strip your people from any and all understanding of it, I'm not going to believe that. One of the chiefs up here, he's a Kiskiak from Senecamoco, Chief First Spear. He's Cape Verdean. He's got Cape Verdean heritage in him. But his grandfather tried to tell him and his family for years what had happened to them down in Virginia, but they were caught up in the whole, Black Power, all of that going on. It wasn't until after his grandfather passed and he started looking into his history that he realized that everything that his grandfather had been trying to tell him, not just, oh, we're Indian, but we were from here. There was a specific history and experience that his grandfather was passing on to him, that he was able to tap into and reconnect with others from down in that region. So I don't buy this notion that the Europeans or the US came in and stripped me and my people of everything we had and knew, and that's why we don't know anything. No. Part of that is going to be, if you are an Indian and you don't know anything, your folks probably said it's better to just leave all of that behind and go do this. And if that's the case, there's no shame in that, but you have no business speaking down on other people who retain the culture and the history and the traditions and the experience and the knowledge. You have no business looking down on them. You should be looking up to them as a resource for you to reconnect with your history. But the flip side to that is perhaps you're just not an Indian. And I don't understand what the problem is with people not being Indians. I don't understand. Why can't you be proud of who you are and what your heritage is if it's not indigenous to these lands? Because in my region up here, the African heritage folks that were brought in, the folks from the Caribbean that were brought in, all of these different populations that were brought in, ended up building really strong relationships with us who are indigenous to these lands, because we were all facing Euro colonization, which was based upon racial categorization and marginalization, and we really had no choice but to bond together. So all of this division that's going on, I really don't get it. It really kind of makes me sad in many instances, because people are looking down upon communities that your ancestors built strong relationships with, if you are indeed an Indian. I don't understand it, and I don't understand why people are acting so Euro-colonial in their mindset. That you're continuing the work that Europeans started, and you can't continue the work that Europeans started while at the same time trying to talk about what devils they are. You're the devil now. You're acting just like them. You're the devil now. Midwest Peace brother, he's talking about the Brothertown. I have Niles. I'm a direct descendant of the Niles that went out to Brothertown. A lot of them started here in this southern New England region, ended up in New York, and then went out to Wisconsin out there in Brotherton. You know, we know the history. We know what happened to our people. No one's going to be able to come in off of what Europeans wrote and tell us anything different. And no one's going to tell me that because someone has a different skin tone than me, because their eyes are lighter than mine, because their hair isn't as kinky as mine, but we're blood related, that we're not blood related. Like that is insane. That's insane. That is insane. And people really need to stop that.
Absolutely. So let me so I think this is a great conversation. I want to address something that, you know, this is the tool they use, right? Walter Plecker, right?
That's for Virginia.
Yeah, I know, but you know, a lot of people came
They're
through
not
Virginia.
from Virginia. It has nothing to do with them. What happened where your people are from? Because the thing is, these integrity acts were implemented by various states.
But let's look at, this is the thing though. Walter Plecker had a target list, instructions. Yeah. So let's look at some of this. It says Plecker's 1943 letter to Virginia hospitals, doctors, and clerks of court, people who are responsible for completing and recording birth, marriage, and death certificates, provided unquestionable orders for how to record births to those of mixed race. So the point is, Walter Plecker wasn't just targeting Negroes or full-blood Indians. He was targeting people of mixed race ancestry. Yes. So for people to claim that Walter Plecker stripped them of their status and identity, at that point, he was only targeting mixed people. So you can't use him and then claim to be a full-blood original Aboriginal when he was targeting mixed people.
Yeah, and the reason he was targeting mixed people, because the goal has always been to breed the Indian out. That's where blood quantum comes from, all of that, because the goal is to have as few Indians as possible. So first you target the mixed ones and you say, well, you're not really an Indian because you're mixed. So since you're not really an Indian, you're going to be a Negro. We're going to push you over into the Negro category. Okay, cool. We got less Indians around now. All right, how do we deal with these ones that we can't label as Negroes? Blood quantum. Okay, well, you need to have this amount of blood quantum. And what's really crazy, when you look at the blood quantum sort of situation, it was never necessarily mandated by the U.S. in the sense that they said you all have to do this. It's just that when tribes were formalizing themselves with constitutions and all that, they wouldn't really approve the Constitution if it didn't have some sort of blood quantum in it. So they never were like, you have to put blood quantum in there. They just wouldn't approve the tribes to be able to get the resources and things that they needed without it. And then the tribe started to internalize that you need to have a particular type of blood quantum, a percentage of blood quantum to be eligible. And now you have a situation where in blood quantum tribes, if my mother's from over here and my father's from over here, but I don't meet the blood quantum for either tribe, then I'm not an Indian in either tribe, even though I'm a quote unquote full blood Indian. I don't meet the blood quantum requirements for either tribe, so I can't be on either rolls. So now, in the eyes of the law, less Indians. The whole goal is to get rid of the Indians. And if you're adopted by a blood quantum situation, it becomes a situation where you have to start pretty much marrying into your own people, or else you have less of the blood quantum. And if you have less of the blood quantum, you're out the tribe. So slowly but surely, the whole goal with these policies, whether it was the one drop rule, whether it's blood quantum, is to get rid of the legally legitimate Indians so that we can once and for all say these lands are ours. And this is all part of a concept called I think it's conscription. Hold on, let me look. Give me 1 second.
All right.
But this,
And let's
this
just,
yes.
no, go ahead. Oh, so let's just also make reference to the combined blood law that was created, and that was for people who were receiving allotments, right?
Yep.
The combined blood law.
Yes.
Which allowed people to maintain, I believe it allowed them to maintain their full blood status if they were from different tribes coming together. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah, that's all.
Hold on, let me see.
And it's okay, and it continues to happen now. It's still happening today. The combined blood law. Okay.
Yes. And when you go back, that was never the way that our people were. For us up here, right? So we have a war, the Narragansett, because we were very warlike people. We have a war up here, right? If we defeat your tribe, we, in many instances, would adopt your warriors that survived into our tribe. Now you're in Narragansett. You're going to fight for us. You're going to do these things here, or you'll be dead. You don't want to die? Okay, you're going to be a part of our tribe now. So this whole concept, and when you look back at it, when the Europeans arrived, we were fighting with our Pequot cousins. One of our best war captains was a Pequot who had become a part of the Narragansett, who fought against the Pequots to push them back from a particular area. And in acknowledgement and respect for his fighting for the Narragansetts, they gave him a sachendom down in that area to hold off the Pequots. So he's a Pequot fighting with the Narragansetts against the Pequots. He wasn't looked at like, oh, you don't have the blood quantum to be in that. You're a part of our society now.
Yeah.
You know, but so what I was talking about, it's a part of prescription. This blood quantum, you're a Negro because all of this is a part of prescription. And prescription is the acquisition of an insular area subject to the supreme power of another sovereign. So you're taking over lands that are subject to another sovereign, the Indian tribal lands, through continuous and undisturbed exercise of that supreme power during such period as is necessary to create, under the influence of historical development, the general conviction that the present conditions of things is in conformity with international order. So basically, you use a land in such a manner for so long that the international community finally says, well, yeah, that's your land. So think about it. You get rid of the mixed bloods because they're really Negroes, they're not Indians.
Mm-hmm.
You breed out the quote unquote full bloods because you don't have the blood quantum anymore. Legally, there's no more Indians around. So whose land is it now? All of these things, the misclassification, all of them are legal strategies to control the land lawfully, because the international community knows very well that the lands are still the Indians' lands. They're being utilized by the U.S. If the U.S. can trick the Indian tribes into forming agreements where they turn the rights over to the U.S., then that's cool. But if not, the lands under international law are still the lands of the Indian tribes. So you have to do what you can do, which is prescript the lands under international law so that you can claim that the Indians no longer exist. These lands are ours now. It's all part of the strategy that's going on. And once again, people are just kind of regurgitating and reapplying the same colonial concepts that stripped their ancestors, if they're Indians, of the lands. And they're just doing it. They're doing the business of the Europeans now. You know, they say in the hood, they don't really got to come in and do anything because, people are doing it to themselves in the hoods. We're killing each other. We're selling drugs to each other. It's the same thing that's going on. It's the same exact thing that's going on. Now people are actually fighting to say that Negroes are the real Indians, which blows my mind, because then why weren't they just called Indians then?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get back to. So because we want to talk about want to talk a little bit about the 1968 Civil Rights Act, which included the Fair Housing Act, which was paramount to Negro communities, right? But another component to the 68 Civil Rights Bill was the Indian Civil Rights Bill.
Yeah.
So this is where people are trying to conflate the two and think because you have Title II and Title VIII, which are the two titles in question. Two different subject matters. One was Indians receiving the same civil rights that all other Americans had received in 64, right? Even though they were full citizens, they were still being discriminated upon. So in 1964, you had the Civil Rights Act, right? That was signed, Lyndon B. Johnson, Martin Luther King, famous act. They had an update in 68, which was to address the housing issue. But at that point, because American Indians had started to stand up for themselves in such a, they had to now update it and give them the same civil rights that they had given to all other Americans.
Well, so it goes a little bit deeper than that as well. Give me 1 second. Let me pull up because the Indian Civil Rights Act was also to grant Indians civil rights that their tribes weren't necessarily giving them.
Yes.
So it didn't necessarily have anything to do with their rights under U.S. law. It was protections they had as U.S. citizens that they weren't necessarily entitled to through their Indian tribe.
Okay, absolutely.
So the 68 Civil Rights Act is completely separate from the 68 Indian Civil Rights Act. As a matter of fact, you can look up the language for the Indian Civil Rights Act. It's 25 U.S.C. Chapter 15, Subchapter 1. The first thing it says is 1302A in general, no Indian tribe in exercising its powers of self-government shall. So the first thing it's doing is talking about Indian tribes. What does the language of the 1968 Civil Rights Act say? Let me see if I could pull it up. The Section 101 amends Chapter 13. So it's not even the same language. They're two separate bills. One is for Indians, one is for U.S. citizens. Just because they were both in 68 doesn't make them the same bill. And see, to me, that's really problematic because that means people didn't even take the time to read the bills. You didn't even take the time to read the bills.
Now, this is a subject matter that people say they want to debate over. Is this even a debate-worthy subject?
You can just pull up the language to the bills and see that they're two separate bills. One is, like I said, let me read it. No Indian tribe in exercising powers of self-government, so they're speaking to the Indian tribes, make or enforce any law prohibiting the free exercise of religion or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition for a redress of grievances. 2, violate the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. 3, subject any person for the same offense to be. Now, these are all rights that are in the Constitution and in previous amendments to the Constitution. So why would there need to be an Indian Civil Rights Act if these things were already in the Constitution, if they're just talking about the people they're calling Negroes? No, these are for Indians who have official relationships with their tribes, and the tribes are saying, well, we don't have to follow what the U.S. says in our self-governance. And this is when you had a lot of conflicts going on amongst tribes and all that. And what they did was pass a bill saying that all of the Indian tribes that were in that domestic dependent status or quasi-sovereign status, who were subject to U.S. authority and jurisdiction, when you're doing self-governance, these are the things that you can't do. Then they talk about offenses subject to greater than 1 year of imprisonment or a fine greater than $5,000. They talk about rights of defendants. They talk about sentences, definitions of offense, and effect of sections. So you can look this up, 25 U.S.C. Chapter 15, which, like I said, is very different than the Civil Rights Act of 1968. It's completely different. It's a whole different bill, different language.
Now, are you familiar with what this petition was about?
Which I think Phoenix had reached out to me initially, inquiring about it. I gave her some feedback on it, but I think my issue generally is this. Once again, it's a band, so there's no obligation.
What
There's
band?
no
See, no, I don't think you know what I don't think you know what the thing was then.
Well, it was some kind of demand upon the BIA, right?
Yeah, they were demand.
When I say band, I don't mean historical band, because take the Sandhill Band of Lenape and Cherokee Indians. That is a tribe that historically came together with another tribe, but the Lenape were there as a nation before they banded with the Cherokee.
Yeah.
So the Lenape's status as a nation, it's a nation. The first treaty with the U.S., the Delaware Union, that is all Lenape history. And then Cherokees moved up. Cherokees moved up and banded together with them. So they're not a historical band. They're a band of people that are coming together right now to try to demand upon the federal government something they don't have the right to demand because they're not a nation or a tribe. The BIA doesn't. There's already urban Indian groups out there.
Yeah. Okay, so all right, yeah. So you're understanding what I'm talking about then. Yeah. Like they call themselves an urban Indian historical collective, something like that.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. If you want to do things for urban Indians, but they can't present themselves as if they have the authority of a nation. So they can't make demands upon the BIA. They don't have anything to do with the BIA. They could perhaps become a 501c3 and then maybe look for some funding that goes to tribal organizations. But they wouldn't have any authority to be the sole spokesperson on behalf of urban Indians, because there's other urban Indian orgs out there.
Yeah. And let me did you see the bullet points from the actual let me see if I can let me find this video. Let me just find this video so you can just hear some of the language being used in this.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, because just to clarify, so once again, the 68 Act is specific to tribes and their dealings with Indians. It's not about Negroes. It's not about U.S. citizens. So if you did not have a relationship with the tribe, this, you know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't going to impact you because your rights are already protected under the U.S. The U.S. can't do those things to you that the tribes were doing to some of their citizens. So if you weren't enrolled with your tribe, well, what does the 68 Act have to do with you? Your civil rights are protected under the 64 Act as a U.S. citizen. So I just want to clarify that.
Absolutely. All right, so let me pull this video up and see if we can get into this a little bit. Just give me a quick moment. Now, like I said, I don't want, it's not the messenger, it's really the message that I'm more concerned with. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to turn this into no personal thing between, you know what I'm saying? Although it seems like it's already gotten there on my side. Simply because at some point you got to deal with what's really going on. You got to, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want you to hear a little bit of this.
That follows the Autonomous Party on Clubhouse. We've been doing rooms, social rooms. People came in the room and brought up what they thought, and we had conversation. See the man in a room on Clubhouse some other things. She left the room. Simple as that. We had the room later
I
on.
don't
I'm
care
gonna
about
call
none of
her
that
out too.
stuff. I just want to talk about the petition.
And everybody that was in the room listening before maybe she came in. Channel. You know what I mean? And since I'm here, people like Top Cat. It's a lot of people that pulled up. And I appreciate them from coming, by the way. Guys, talk to her on the phone and explain to her, like, no, that's not how that went down. Why do you
just give me a moment?
Can get his own story out. But with all that being said, Ishmael Bey takes it upon himself because one of the members of our party asked them, like, hey, what y'all really mad about? Is it about us not supporting the petition? And that's when all hell broke loose, right? So then you get Ishmael Bey,
okay, here we go,
or American Indian. And specifically, what his opinion was on her petition. All right. So on her petition, I want to make sure I pull this up so we can be right and exact. All right. So let me share this here. This Miss Stale petition right here. All right. We are American Indian. All right. So it's clear she had her own petition at about 3,000, a little over 3,000 signatures. All right. And she started this petition, I want to say she said about a year ago. Let me double check real quick. Yeah. Want to say, let me see if it got the date on here. Let me see. Yeah, clearly you can see it's been over a year since she had this petition. All right. So in Stale's petition, even though at the party, the petition itself, like just having a petition, we don't agree with petitioning for anything when it comes to anything that has to do with a remedy. However, the basis and the content in what Ms. Stale put in the petition, we do agree with, because she's talking about the misnomers, the labeling, all of the other things that we know to be a fact, which was the same reason why, like, we didn't agree with the urban Indian petition. We at least agreed on the misclassification part. So let's get that misunderstood. Misclassification is not the issue. Okay, that is not the issue whatsoever. And we're going to get to what's the big issue in their petition. So Ms. Stale petition, it referenced ADRIP, UNDRIP specifically, and different things that had to do with the Civil Rights Act of 1968. All right, so right here, she breaking down the UNDRIP. For those of you who don't know, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. All right, so she literally cited it. And this is what she was using on the basis of this petition, basically to bring awareness and start a conversation. All right. That's all it was. So no problem with that. She did a great job. You could tell she coming out of the education community because she cited her sources, the whole nine. She's not really asking for anything. Her main purpose, the purpose of this petition, is to cease presenting misnomers and fictitious labels placed upon American Indians and those whom are descendants to those indigenous to the Americas based on physical appearance and phenotype. Anybody in this community should have no problem with that whatsoever. All right. So she came with what she came with. We told her what we said. We left it at that. So come to find out, she was a part of the initial grouping of these individuals. She left for whatever her reasons are. You know, we ain't gonna get into that because this is not a Stale versus them. This is just a timeline of how things actually happen in real time. Stale never told us none of y'all business. We didn't know nothing about the inner workings of shit that y'all got going on. We just know what we saw from the outside, and we put our own conclusion together once we got the information. So whether y'all stole the idea from her or not, who knows? We don't care about that part. That's the part that y'all keep trying to frame the narrative because that's the type of shit y'all want to do. We never said y'all stole it. That's not between us. Now, if you ask Miss Stell what she think about it, now that because we have had this conversation with her, that's a whole nother story. But as far as what we talking about, we not saying you stole it because honestly, the petition that she wrote was way better than y'all's when it comes to being lawfully or legally sound and historically sound. All right. So now for those of y'all, we'll put the link for Stale petition in there. If somebody from the team could put it in the chat so people can see, that's cool. Y'all can check that out. Do what you do. You know what I'm saying? If they stole it, I got a very good idea, me personally, that they definitely got the idea from her because you can tell in the timing of things and how it played out. And if she was still down with y'all, why she ain't there no more? But that's a whole nother story. So now let's get to their petition because here go the real problem. You got something to chime in real quick, Matt?
No, I think you riding right on purpose, right on time. Go ahead, keep going.
For sure. Let me get this other one up. All right. So the big bad bullies. Here go their petition right here. Keyword, remedy. Now, anybody dealing with law understands when you saying a remedy, you saying you coming with a fix, you coming with a solution, right, to a problem. So we talking law now. All right, now, here go my problem with you, Phoenix. Since you here, make sure you hear this part clear. Now, I'm not no person I don't hate, right? I've been watching your videos when I first came into this information. And one thing that stuck out to me the most, because I like law, I got a passion for law. The number one thing that made me gravitate to you in the beginning is because you were speaking on law. So now I'm trying to figure out, how do you, who understand legal maxims, who understand public and private, and all this other shit, how do you go from that to what you wrote in this petition? Because this petition is nowhere near a remedy. It's not legal nor lawful, and it's built upon straight up bullshit. So I'm trying to figure out, either you're not qualified to be in this leadership position that this petition is trying to put you in, or you playing some type of slick side game on the back end. Either way it go, we're going to put it out there and we're going to let the people decide, because you ain't want to come speak for yourself, you and your big boy ish. So you can respond to this however you like, but we're going to get the facts out there. Now, on this first things I realized it. And I'm going to do a high affairs, National Archives, Department of Housing, United States Department of Defense, and United States Department of Commerce. Cool.
All right. So listen. What type of demand is that?
My bad. I'm sorry. I'm muted. So they want discovery, access, and redress to all known tribal records that provide. Well, what right would the U.S. government have to give people access to tribal records?
Which are family records.
Yeah, they're the tribe's records. And which specific records are you looking for? Distinction of the misclassified American Indian that in possession of the United States Bureau of Indian Affairs, National Archives, Department of Housing, United States. But if they're family records, then how would they hand them over to a private group?
Exactly.
All right.
This is just some of the bizarre.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of where Yeah, when she, because like I said, I believe she sent it over to him, and I gave her feedback, and I think my general, I thought that I could see where she was trying to go, but I didn't quite understand what the authority was for them to claim a lot of these things. Create a federally commissioned genealogical committee managed by the UIHS to examine genealogical findings of bloodline lineage of misclassified. So once again, why would the federal government need to do that? What is it when you can go and reclassify yourself on the US Census, when there are private organizations out there where you could get access to records and all that? Why is it the federal government's authority job to do that? And I say that because there's a thing called standing, and standing means that I myself was harmed by this particular action. For our ancestors who were misclassified in that regard, they might have had a case. But if our parents marked us down as this of their free will, they didn't have a gun to their head, they weren't being, then there's really no standing to claim that something happened, especially not when you can go on the US Census, which is every 10 years, and just reclassify yourself. So there's many different avenues. If people want to be on record as being an American Indian, they could go ahead and do that. But I also don't understand why the government would be required to do these things for a private group that's not a nation. Like I said, the UIHS appears to be a band. It's a band of people that are saying that they were misclassified. So it's a band of people who don't have any specific relationship to a tribe, which means that they don't have the authority to claim things that a tribe would. And no tribe could say, well, give us the records for everyone. So a private group wouldn't be able to say that. Let me see. Create tribal band extension commission approved by the UIHS.
Well, yeah, I can let him read it, and then we can
Okay.
you don't have to read it.
You want access to the records? Hey, ain't no biggie there. That makes sense, right?
That doesn't make sense
Second
to me.
point, you want to create a federally commissioned genealogy committee managed by y'all, UIHS, to examine the genealogy findings of bloodline lineage for misclassified American Indians, right? So here we are, right here and there. As part of this petition, this would put you guys in a power position, right? So anybody who's putting themselves in a power position needs to be for the people.
See, my thing is, how do you, all right, you're saying you're misclassified.
Yeah.
Right? These people, like, we can understand how you're misclassified, how we're misclassified, how our people are misclassified. It's right there. You can see our community's history.
Yeah.
Right? And everybody who's a part of that experience, it didn't just happen to them, it happened to their community. Am I right? Is it safe to say that?
Yes, because it was a tribe. It wasn't the individual, it was the tribe that this happened to.
So why would they need to get that information? Why wouldn't you already know that information? This is why when I say to people, community, why, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're making claims that they want information on misclassified Indians. How do you know they're misclassified?
Yes.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
And my thing is this: why are we going to the federal government for this instead of going to the Indian tribes? If you are misclassified, what isn't your goal to get back with your community and back with your tribe?
No, you're going to see what it really is. Hold on.
Okay.
Keep going. You're going to see what it's really about.
It would just make the most sense, right? Since you're trying to ask for these things and you want yourself to be in charge. All right, so now, next they want an oversight committee that governs the 7 mandatory criteria for tribal membership and appeals for tribal membership denial within all state and federally recognized tribes.
Yeah,
right?
well, so pause that for a second. Pause that for a second. So what they're getting into sovereignty. So let me explain how this works. tribes have sovereign rights to determine who is or is not a citizen of their tribe. If I'm 100% full blood, whatever, but Asher, but I don't conduct myself in accordance with the traditions and cultural norms of that tribe, they can put me out. That's what sovereignty is all about. And that goes all the way back. If you was acting up within your tribe, they put your stuff on the edge of the territory till you don't come back. That's how a lot of bands got started. People who were outcasts from their tribe end up linking up in the wilderness together, forming bands, but they weren't the tribes. So every tribe has sovereignty. I myself, I'm Narragansett, but I'm not enrolled with the federally recognized Narragansett Indian tribe. My mother is, my aunts are, some of my younger cousins are. I'm not. Regardless of how I feel about it, they have the sovereignty to decide who they want to let into their tribe or don't want to let into their tribe. They have the right to determine what the criteria is to be a member of their tribe. Just because I'm not enrolled with the Narragansett, the federally recognized Narragansett Indian tribe, doesn't mean I'm not a Narragansett. It means that I'm not enrolled with the federally recognized Narragansett Indian tribe.
Yeah.
Who am I enrolled with? The Mashipog Narragansett tribe, who are Narragansetts. We're just not federally recognized. So there's no space for the federal government to say to an Indian tribe, you have to let these people on your rolls because we said so. That's once again, that's recolonization. That's taking sovereignty away from Indian tribes and giving it to the U.S. government. But aren't we upset that about the whole $5 Indian situation where we're saying that the U.S. allowed Indians who weren't really Indians to be? Well, it sounds like the same thing's being asked of the government again. And once again, that's where my misunderstanding comes in, because if it's not good when the Europeans did it, why is it good when we try to do it?
Okay, so yeah, because what it sounds to me is they're looking for the BIA to empower them over federal Indian nations, as to who is in their nation.
Yeah. And that's not it. The government can't do that. That's the first thing. Secondly, it's not going to do that.
And thirdly, why? Well, for me, thirdly, like this would be first and foremost, who you would think that you are deserving of that power?
That was going to be my third thing. What gives anyone, never mind just this group, anyone the authority, the right to feel they have authority to determine who belongs where? If indigenous folks have the right to self-determination, then how can you
trying to take it away?
Yes, the federal government to determine who is or is not for them. I think it's that. And this is, like I said, this is where it just becomes, the issue is, if the Indian tribe is not accepting of people who have the heritage to the Indian tribe, that is something that the Indian tribe needs to work out. It's not the federal government's fault. That is an internal issue that the Indian tribes have to deal with. And I don't disagree that it's a problem, because there's a lot of racism that goes on in Indian tribes. There's a lot of history that has been mistaught to people. There's a lot of just family conflicts. Maybe you're not being accepted into that Indian tribe because that Indian tribe is aware of who your family line is, and maybe they know something that one of your ancestors did. You folks
real
don't
quick
care about misclass American.
No. That's A. Marie Kahan.
A. Marie
Kahan.
You were misclassified from what nation? And what do you mean you have self-determination?
She said we only care about federally Neither of us are federally recognized. Like, what are you talking about?
And this is the foolishness, because we're not feeding into your victim mentality based off of a generalized claiming of an identity. Because American, well, if you're Ameri, that's saying to me that are you down somewhere in South America? Because we didn't call these lands up here Ameri or Ta Ameri. My people, Meshantikit, Meswaskit, Meshipog. You know, these are the names that we had. You don't sound like you even know who you are. Further, misclassified from where? If you were misclassified as a Negro, could you have been from the Igbo people and been misclassified as a Negro? Could you have been from the Hausa people and been misclassified as a Negro? Misclassified from what to what you're claiming today? The generic stuff doesn't work when you're dealing with other Indians. You can pull that generic stuff when you're talking to people who don't know their history, who aren't tied to their nations, who haven't gone through the experiences that you're claiming to have gone through. You can't pull that with us. You have to save those tricks for the audience you can play them with. If you can't tell me who you were misclassified from, my mother's birth certificate said Negro. She was misclassified from a Narragansett to a Negro. So I know who she was misclassified from. Your mother was never part of the American people. None of your ancestors told you that they were American. You made that up for yourself. You don't have the right to self-determine a made-up identity for yourself. That's not what UNDRIP and ADRIP are saying. And UNDRIP and ADRIP are talking about peoples, groups of peoples, nations, not an individual person. As right now, with your birth certificate and all of that, you are self-determined to be a U.S. citizen. That's your identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk. Let me ask you something about this. When they talk about status in terms of U.S., like they changed my status, is status other than citizen?
No. What do they mean? Changed your status from what? As a matter of fact, one of the biggest issues was that because the Indians weren't citizens, they couldn't vote, so they had no say in anything that the U.S. was doing to them. Now, the real reason they made us citizens is because they wanted, once again, to prescript the lands. Well, if they're all citizens, that means that they're not underneath their own tribal nation. So once again, they're not real Indians and we own their land. But the flip side to that is, as citizens, the right to vote, the right to say that this is wrong or this is right, all of those things that citizens are entitled to, you now have access to. So when you say they changed your status from what? You got to speak specifically with me here. I don't want to hear this generic. First of all, who's they? Because for us, it was the state of Rhode Island. The state of Rhode Island is the one we had issues with. The people from the colony of Rhode Island are the ones we had issues with.
They bowed out. They bowed out. They indigenous to America. We don't have to spend no more time on that.
They indigenous to America. That sounds ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds absolutely. So you're not from a tribe here then. You're indigenous to America. Who's the America tribe? I'm Narragansett. There was no America tribe up in my people's territory, so you're clearly not from up here. I know what Lenape is. Pequot.
You don't know about the Amaragockens? You don't know about the Amaragockens?
No, they weren't up here in my territory. Why would I be expected to learn about them? Why would I be expected to know about them?
Yeah, there was a small band called like the Amaragockens, something like that. I can't say it right, but they came up. They visited up here for a little bit. It was like 17 people, and they'll try to throw that name up.
Well, how are they blood related to those people?
They blood related to that 1828 Webster's Dictionary definition of America.
All right, written by a European.
Absolutely.
See
That's
what I'm saying?
Creation story.
Let me ask this: of these groups that are saying this Aboriginal stuff, who can tell me anything about themselves that doesn't need to go to what a European wrote? That's always my question. What the Europeans wrote should be supplementing what you know about your people. So my grandmother told me I was a Narragansett, and then she brought me down to the Narragansett powwows every year. I didn't need to read in a book that I was a Narragansett. I'm at this powwow with all these people that look like me down here. And I'm hearing about this is the oldest powwow, and I'm hearing songs. So now when I go and look up European stuff, oh wow, yeah, that's right. That's what my grandmother said. Oh, that's right. I heard them say that at the powwow. So the barometer for what's true or not is my people and my history and my heritage. And then I'm able to look at what the Europeans write and say, okay, they're on point there, or no, that's completely off. I don't gauge myself and my identity based on what Europeans wrote and then go and argue with Indians, telling them they're wrong because the Europeans said this. That is madness. That says that Europeans are your barometer for who you are. And how can a European tell you who you are as an indigenous person?
There you go. So here, let's get back to this petition.
All right.
Let Miss A. Marie sidetrack us.
To review all the grievances for ongoing misclassification efforts from the United States Department of Interior and United States Bureau of Indian Affairs. All right. So basically, you want a committee that's going, another committee that's outside of the government that's going to monitor the government. So the shit that y'all asking, you literally think in the position that we're in, the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Indian Affairs were the War Department. The exact same reason that we in this situation right now. And you think that just writing them a nice letter is going to give them an oversight committee to y'all to be able to tell them what to do. Like, this is fantasy land shit that we talking about, but we're going to break it down even further. All right. So once again, create a tribal band extension commission approved by the UIHS within the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Now, what does that mean? If you're going to be within something, that means you're within collaboration with them. Now, I thought the BIA is the ops. How are you going to create anything that's working with them and be under them? And you want it to be overseen by the DOJ. The DOJ, these are people are all in collusion together. It don't even make sense what you're saying, bro. All right. So now to the next one.
Hold up.
Immediate, you need.
Now, to me, that sounds like you're trying to pull a coup and you want to get the federal government to back you. That's what it sounds like to me.
Wouldn't Congress be the oversight for the BIA? It's a federal department, right? So I don't like this yet. Like I say,
yeah, you don't know what to say.
And it's a misclassified American Indian. American Indian from where? Like I said, that's a political status. So misclassified, because you can't set up things for the not misclassified Narragansetts. That's me and my people. You can't set up things for the misclassified Poconokeets. That's their people. You can't set up things for the misclassified Pequots. That's their people. So then my question becomes, which of these nations or which of these people granted this organization the authority to speak on their behalf, like you asked in the beginning? And if we don't want the federal government speaking on our behalf, we'll speak on our behalf. Why would we want any other organization to speak on our behalf? And why would you want to speak on the behalf of people that haven't given you their blessing or their authority to do that? And then ultimately, why isn't the goal to reconnect with everyone's specific tribal nation? That, to me, that should be the goal and the energy expend. If I know I'm from here, then my goal is to rebuild relationships with this group of people. Because to me, let's say the government actually did do this, you're still in enmity with your people. You've just had the federal government come and say, put these people into your tribe. There's still no relationship. There's still no connection. There's still going to be internal fighting. And then what's the step after that? After they say, put these people into your tribe, then what happens after that? If there's conflicts, do you call in the federal government on the tribe? Do you? I would see this more creating internal conflicts within the tribal nations than fixing anything. And once again, I'll point to my own people. We knew who we were. We know who we are. A lot of us, especially when federal recognition came around, the tribe started removing larger Narragansett families from the federally recognized roles. So for my people, we just reorganized all of those larger families. My tribe is consisting of 13 families. We call them clans, but they're 13 families, all documented historical Narragansetts. And we reconstitutionalized Mashapog, which is one of the ancestral villages where we all live now. So we're not going after federal recognition. We were seeking to reestablish our traditions and our cultures and create and provide a space for our people. We didn't need to reach out or call upon the federal government to do that. You can do that on your own. Get together and connect with your traditions. And in the process of us doing that, we've started to rebuild relationships with the federally recognized tribe because there's no denying who we are. They know who we are. There's no denying it. So now when you get to a point where there's no denying it, now comes the healing and the forming of community. And that's not going to happen. I can tell you, there's been a few people who have tried to complain to the federal government about the fact that they're not on the rolls or this, that, and that has done nothing but cause confusion and cause animosity and cause conflict. And to me, I didn't want to be a part of that because me being a Narragansett isn't determined by whether or not I'm federally recognized. I'm a Narragansett because that blood runs through my veins. So what do I need to be doing to rebuild community, to teach these traditions and cultures to my children, to provide a space for other families to come back and be reconnected with their culture? To me, that's what the goal should be. And the goal should be trying to rebuild those relationships with your extended family, whether they're federally recognized or not. That federal recognition is a colonial status and concept that's placed upon us, once again, to divide and diminish the Indians. Because if you're not federally recognized, now I can say, well, you're not an Indian underneath our law. There's more Indians gone. So this, to me, and it's with all due respect to Phoenix, I've known him for a very long time, but it comes across as trying to take the position of the federal government over the Indians, and I don't see how this serves to build relations, and I don't see how it's not another form of colonization of the Indians when you have an outside entity telling them what they have to or do not have to do. And then so if this can be done to others, at what point can this turn and be done to you is my question. Where is the space in here? So who oversees the UIHS? That's my question.
Let's see.
Unique and distinct federal protections for the UIHS Genealogy Committee.
Hold up. Yeah, listen to that.
Now, this part didn't even make no sense. Immediate, unique. Now, y'all read this too. Tell me if it makes sense. Immediate, unique, and distinct federal protections for the UIHS Genealogy Committee determined misclassified American Indian now and forever to be classified as the urban Indian. So is y'all trying to say that you want to take the term the misclassified American Indian and now they're going to be labeled as an urban Indian? What does that even mean? Because that shit don't make no sense. So it seemed like to me, y'all want to create your own classification. because clearly this what that says. Even though y'all did a terrible job of writing this shit, because you got to read it 3-4 times to even understand what y'all saying. And based on what Ms. Steele was telling us, basically, y'all try to make it seem like didn't want to get behind what she had going on because she had grammatical errors in her shit. Whole time, this shit is written terribly. But let's just get back to the bullet points. So like I just said, it clearly says that y'all want to make up your own classification now called the urban Indian, right? Once again, putting you guys in charge, okay? So then after that, it says exception, private law to supersede tribal registration, now urban Indian. And they want a special task force creation for investigation into human trafficking of the misclassified American Indian. Don't this sound like that Freedman shit with this reparations task force? So basically, this is y'all response to the Freedman, huh, bro? Like y'all wanna, y'all think that they just finna go in knowing the real history. This is the crazy part. For y'all to be master teachers, right? You want them to create a task force into human trafficking. Like, man, listen. Yo, this shit so poorly written that it's funny, but it's really not, because y'all getting people hopes and dreams of acting like this is the end of be all and trying to bully people who don't want to be down. So let's be clear why we in this situation. You know, so when people did not want to support it, even if they did say nothing against it, it was a problem, right? But the reason why we didn't support it is because we actually read the shit. Because most of the people who signed this, they never read the whole thing, and if they had questions, they was too scared to ask.
Hey, hold on, Monte. For the record,
ahead,
hold on. For the record.
Go ahead.
Now, I don't really get where, like, all that to me just sounds completely delusional. Sounds dangerous on some levels. Like, they don't even know what the hell they're asking for. At one point, they asked for immediate protection, and like basically they want the federal government to create a fucking team that protects the committee members. So they understand that what they're trying to do is going to cause division. To me, this sounds completely dangerous, and I don't know what would make somebody think they could create a document like this. And what about the 10,000 people that have signed it? What does that say about them?
Yeah, I just so I'm looking at federal exception and private law to supersede tribal registration requirements for the urban Indian. So once again, a colonial entity is going to be able to come in and tell my tribe who we have to accept as a part of our community. And then there's also to be forever classified as the urban Indian. What if you move out of the urban area? What if you move to a rural area? Are you still an urban Indian?
Now, let me say this about the urban Indian whole thing. I pulled the information up the other day. So urban Indian is that's already a
yes.
It's a pre-existing government concept that to be a part of that, you have to create a organization that has a
that's what I mean.
You know what I mean? You have to some type of 501c3. Yeah. And I looked up the requirements to have an urban indigenous what not company, but whatever it was. It said that on your board you had to have half the board had to be people who were directly connected to their tribal communities.
Yes.
So for them to even use the urban Indian, and then now they want to create the urban Indian political party. They're trying to hijack a pre-existing movement. The urban Indian movement already exists. And damn near every major state, city in America.
So
like
the Indian House in New York is going to be an urban Indian organization.
Yeah.
The Rhode Island Indian Council, the Connecticut Indian Council, the New York Indian Council, these are all urban Indian organizations. They're dealing with Indians that are in urban areas.
Yeah. And they want to monopolize that title now. Like, see what I'm saying? And put anything urban Indian under them.
Yeah, and that's what, like, that is my thing. I'm just concerned about the notion that one group of people should be able to tell Indian tribes what they do or do not have to do. It's a direct assault upon sovereignty. It's unconstitutional, to be very honest, because Indian tribes are the third sovereign underneath U.S. law. You have the states who form the feds, and then you have the Indian tribes that were here before the states. So what would give... I'm just trying to understand, if it's about sovereignty and self-determination, why is that being taken away from the federally recognized tribes? Is it because they didn't do what someone thought they should do?
It's because these people know they will not get accepted into the tribe, not because somebody's hating on you, because you're not them people. Like, people, like, listen, at some point, like, yeah, I don't even, it's not, I'm really speechless right now, to be honest with you. This shit is, because listening to it this time, it sunk even deeper. Like, it just sounds to me like they're trying to pull a coup on the American Indians and force their way in, and not only force their way in, but try to position themselves in some type of authoritative position.
Yeah. And I'm very concerned about that.
Absolutely, bro. In this time, in this climate, like, they're trying to start some type of, you know what I mean? Like, let me say something to you, bro. I don't think they understand how passionate people are about their experiences.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to claim American Indian. You're trying to attach yourself to the 1968 American Indian Civil Rights Act, not even aware of all the American Indian movement and everything that they've done.
Yeah.
You're trying to take credit for that. You're trying to monopolize the urban Indian identity. It's insane to me, bro. This, to me, is like, they're going to put themselves in harm's way. Like, I don't think they understand how dangerous this is. There's organizations out there that actually, like these Indians out west ain't playing. Not with their culture.
No.
Not with their history. They don't understand it. They think it's just me and you. They're about to wake up a whole larger beast.
Yeah, and this is my thing, Turtle. All of the fighting and arguing that we've been going through here, at the end of the day, what we're saying is true and correct. So regardless of what Indians anywhere don't like it, everyone got to bow down to the truth at the end of the day. So when they look and they say, oh, you guys only care, or you guys are only accepted. No, we're accepted because we're the truth, and there's no denying the truth. That's why we're accepted. We're not accepted.
We don't deny the truth.
There you go. We're not accepted because we capitulated to something. We're not accepted. We're accepted because the truth is the truth. So my thing is, if you are who you say you are, why aren't you going to your people to argue the truth with them? Why get together with other people that you're not blood related to, adopt a colonial term, whatever that term be, Aboriginal, American Indian, Indigenous, if you know what your actual identity is, if you know you're a Narragansett, if you know you're a Powhatan, I always say incorrect, Powhatan, if you know you're Powhatan, if you know you're Lenape, if you know you're Lakota, if you know you're these things and you've proven it, why aren't you going and arguing with the people you should actually be arguing with for them to recognize your truth? Why are you jumping and asking a third party to come in and force your truth upon people? That's your fight. And I personally, I've been at this fight. I've never been on the rolls. So, you know, my family have been fighting for me to get on the rolls, 44 years now. This has been a fight for 44 years now. Why aren't people having this like those the Cherokee freedmen that been fighting to get onto the Cherokee rolls, right? They're not, they've been fighting within their nation for that. They're having a fight with their nation around that. They're not running to form a group with other people from other nations who is classified and then going and saying to the government, tell all the tribes they have to do this. They're saying, look, we have rights that are identified in this particular treaty with this particular nation that need to be respected. So it's a specific fight, and it's specific to those individuals based upon their blood heritage to that particular nation. Why isn't that the route that others are going? I'm just, and like I said, there's no disrespect to Phoenix or anyone who's moving in this. I'm just trying to understand it from a legal perspective, and I'm mainly trying to understand it from a cultural perspective. As the chief of a tribe, no one's gonna come and tell me who I have to have in my tribe. No one's gonna come and tell my people who we have to have in our tribe, unless they have a right to be in our tribe. And then that we should be, once again, bowing down to what the truth of the culture is, what the traditions are. That should be the guiding point. But for someone to just say, because for someone to, the way you do it in our tribe, you have to be a part of one of the families, one of the clans, or if you have generic Narragansett history, you have to come before the council and explain why you're not with your own people. If you're Narragansett, well, which tribe is your people with? Because there's a Mashapag, there's a Northern Narragansett tribe, there's a Uskapag Nihantic Narragansett, there's a Ninigrit Nahantic Narragansett, and then there's the federally recognized Narragansett Indian tribe. So the first thing we're going to ask is, well, where is your family at? Which tribe is your family a part of? And then if you're a part of one of the other tribes, the next question we're going to ask is, well, why aren't you with your family? You're not just going to get to automatically come over because you're a Narragansett. Why aren't you with your family? And then after that, the council is going to have some discussion, and the council has the right to say, no, you need to be over with your family. No one's going to come in after the council says that and tell us, no, you need to accept this person. That sounds ridiculous. We don't have to accept anyone, just like no one has to accept us. However, we do have to accept those who meet the criteria and operate accordingly. So this is all comes to the point of sovereignty. If Indian nations are sovereigns, then they have the right to self-determination. And if they have the right to self-determination, Sean Finley, if you're Chata, why aren't you with the Chatas then? You don't need recognition
he
from
don't need
people?
Yeah, he don't need recognition.
That sounds so you don't need your own people to recognize you, then why even bother complaining then? It comes across like really, it seems to me that the ground basis for a lot of this is wanting benefits and supports and maybe some money from the feds. Because you don't want to go to your Chata tribe, but you still want benefits for American Indians, which are because you're a Chata. And how is sovereignty corny? I don't even understand. Sovereignty is how tribes, sovereignty is why Indian tribes even have rights, because they're sovereigns. So how can sovereignty be corny? Because if there's no sovereign Indian tribe, then there's no such thing as a Chata. It doesn't exist.
Bro, this is corny because he's seeing how shallow his cup is. See what I'm saying? he's realizing that whatever he's standing on is shaky.
Yeah,
that's why this shit is
wait.
corny.
So if you're a chata, then that means that your people are Chief Warhorse's people, right? So you don't need recognition from your chief that you're a chata?
He's a Chief Warhorse.
I'm not quite understanding this.
Well, no, they definitely don't need. Well, I don't know. Yeah. Go ahead, go down there and get with your people. Then she's very public.
This is what I'm saying. Like, if you're a chata, why are you not linked up with the chatas then? If the chatas don't say you're a chata, then how do we know you're a chata? Like my people, no one will tell you I'm not an Narragansett. They will tell you, well, he's not on the rolls. That'll be the conversation. They're not going to say I'm not an Narragansett. They'll say that I'm not on the rolls, and I don't disagree with them. I'm not on the rolls, but that don't mean I'm not a Narragansett. And yeah, I need to be recognized because only Indians can decide who other Indians are. Europeans don't have the authority to do that. Indians decide who other Indians are. So
Chata. I'm Chata. Don't like. We're not gonna get too carried, caught up in these little side conversations. These people ain't really looking for no edification, bro. Trust me.
How many people have come in our room asking us about the petition, put it in our chats and stuff like that, and then when we asked them to read it, they said they signed it because they're supporting them. Then when we ask them to read it, they don't agree with certain things in it. How many people we come across?
I can't even keep count, bro. But every one of them said that they didn't read the whole.
So hold on. Let me tell my little experience because they're trying to act like I'm somehow a fake. She's trying she said, "Oh, you fake." Now, she's not saying I'm fake. She's saying I'm a fake person. I'm not genuine. Now, this is the thing. 2 years ago, we invited her and her organization to the Indigenous Peoples Parade in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. She said, "Oh, yeah, we got this petition." I said, "Oh, cool. Shit, you could be out there and circulate it and get you some signatures, right?" I'm not thinking this is what's in the petition. You know what I'm saying? Now, they asked me to sign it. I never signed it. Definitely never signed it. And I never read it. What I read, I didn't see all this, I'll tell you that. But I never took it serious, right? So a year later, 2 years later, about a year later, I see this video. And I start to understand what they were asking for in the petition. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm offended. You know what I'm saying? But I don't got really nothing to, you know what I mean? Like I'm not seeking any confrontation, but what I am doing is correcting misinformation. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like now, if that's gonna create a situation where she's trying to act like I'm trying to get tough with her. She's saying things like, I took pictures with people of less than questionable, like she's talking about everything except the 1968 Indian civil rights case. Mm-hmm. Right? She wants to start slandering me now. I'm used to that. Like people have been doing that to me for years now. That's not no big deal. Right? But I'm more concerned about the information, and I'm even more concerned about the fact that if you was at that parade and I had something to do with it, and this is what you were circulating, I feel responsible. And I have to address that shit. You understand? That's how I feel. That's just me. You know what I mean? So she want to act like I switched up, and nah, I just really figured out what it is you was trying to fucking pull. And now they're bragging that they got 10,000 signatures. So you got 10,000 people signing this. So you think that some type of mob petition is going to create this shit for you. That is like colonial. That's colon. You know what I'm saying? That's like, so you want to overthrow tradition with mob rule.
Well, and that is the point that I'm making. Like this, the language of this, no matter who's putting it forward, the language of this seems to be an assault on tribal sovereignty and an undermining of cultural norms. And I personally can't support that because that is colonial behavior. Once again, before Europeans got here, if your community, your village didn't want you to be a part of the village, you weren't a part of the village. And if you did want to be a part of the village, you figured out what the issue was and you went and addressed it. So if someone lied on you and said that you weren't such and such's daughter, you weren't such and such's grandson, you went and addressed that with the people that were lying on you. If someone said that you were just trying to take from the tribe, you would go and address that and say, no, I'm not just trying to take from the tribe. What I've seen a lot of times with the folks who talk about how the tribes didn't accept them, or the tribe, that they go with their hand out. The first thing out their mouth is, where's my this? Where's my that? I'm supposed to have. You're supposed to give me. And I don't care who you are, Indian or not. I don't care if we're blood related or not. If I'm just meeting you and the first thing out your mouth to me is, where's mine? We're going to have a problem. So sovereignty is fundamental to anything related to being an Indian. That's the basis of it. That is why Indian treaties were signed, because the Indian tribes were viewed as sovereigns. Rights that Indian tribes have are based in their sovereignty, their right to have their own customs, traditions, laws, ways that they go about doing things. The reason why Indians are viewed as separate in a sense from the U.S. is because they are part of a separate sovereign. Sovereign means the authority to make your own decisions. So we can't claim to be a part of a sovereign and then at the same time want another sovereign to come in and tell that sovereign what to do. It's got to be one or the other. We can't have our cake and eat it too. And we most certainly can't do that when it comes to who a tribe decides to recognize or not as a part of it. You are who your bloodlines are. Once again, your ancestry is your ancestry. And you can mark down on the U.S. Census all you want. I'm an American Indian. I'm from this nation. I'm from that nation. Your right to go and be a part of that particular community and to take advantage of the benefits and resources that that community has is something completely different. That's in the same manner you can write down that you're a U.S. citizen. But if you're barred from the state of Massachusetts because you did something criminal, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what it is. You can't go back to Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a sovereign state. It has the right to make its own laws. It has the right to determine who can be within its jurisdiction and who can't. And unless you have a right that Massachusetts is violating or not recognizing, you don't have any sort of redress to go and force anyone to let Massachusetts let you do something that Massachusetts said you can't do. These are all concepts of sovereignty. So when I'm reading this, I'm also now realizing that there seems to be a lack of comprehension or else a lack of knowledge around what sovereignty actually means, why it's inherent to Indian tribes, and why the feds only go up to certain points when they're dealing with Indian tribes. They will address matters that they think impact the interests of the U.S., but they will leave internal tribal matters to the tribes themselves because they say that's a matter of sovereignty and we can't get involved in that. And it would appear to me from reading this, because this is the first time I've gone in depth. Like I said, I kind of touched base on it, and I gave, if I'm not mistaken, I gave Phoenix some general feedback. But now that I'm looking at this particular language, it seems that perhaps there's a misunderstanding of what sovereignty means and why it has to be respected, whether for good or bad on a personal level, for individuals who are claiming to be tied to a separate autonomous sovereign from the United States and from the states themselves.
I would agree. I would add a lot more to it, but I'm gonna leave that for another, you know what I'm saying? for one of my rants maybe one day. But yeah, now I feel like I've always treated her fairly. You know what I'm saying? A lot of things I don't agree with that people talk about that I don't always rebut as it, you know what I mean, in the moment it's coming out their mouth. Some things I'm just like, time will, you know what I mean? Time will, you know, some things don't age well. Let's just put it that way. You know what I mean? I knew this wasn't going to age well. You know, the whole concept of the other day, she said, civil rights lawyers don't know about the American Indian civil rights. I said, what did you just say? What would make you think a civil rights lawyer don't know about American Indian civil rights? That is just insane to me. And that you would say that out loud around people. Like, this is the type of stuff that people are subject to at this point. And not only are they subject to, but they actually find comfort in hearing this type of conversation. You know what I mean? Like, they have 10,000 signatures. What does that mean about them 10,000 people?
Yeah, they're either not understanding. I think often people are swayed by emotions.
Yeah,
it sounds good. You're right. I believe I was misclassified, and you guys are fighting for the rights of the people, so I'm going to support. But I would say that that's what a lot of the problems in the Black community generally are. We have leaders that appeal to the emotions of the people, and then people don't really understand. And then when this leader's now in position and the leader's not doing what the people think is right, the people are now upset with that leader. But you weren't necessarily paying attention to what the leader was saying. You more got caught up in the emotion of it.
Yep.
So in my opinion, you're just as wrong as the leader is, because if you didn't take time to inform yourself around what this leader was saying, but you empowered them, then you have a role to play in that as well. So when I look at this, I mean, like I said, you know, doing something for misclassified urban Indians, that's a noble venture. But there are lots of organizations and lots of people that are already doing that. Just a couple of weeks ago, I went to the funeral of Chief Darrell Waldron. He's the chief of the Seekonk Wampanoag. For those who may not know, the Seekonk are a branch of the Pokanoket who were underneath the war captain Anawan, who fought with Benjamin Church. And after the war, they got placed in a particular area that became known as Seekonk. Seekonk in our language is a corruption of Suki Hunk, which means black goose. Suki is black and Hunk is goose, a hunk. So they were called the Seekonks. So he's the chief of that particular family lines. And once again, they're Pokanokets, but there are specific family lines that are Seekonk. So the federal government couldn't come and say, oh, well, you're going to make these people Seekonks, because they're going to say, well, you know, what is the family here? But the point I'm making is he runs the Rhode Island Indian Council, Connecticut Indian Council, New York Indian Council. He's done tremendous work for Indians over 30, 40 years. And that work was passed on to him from his mother and those who came before him. So doing work for urban Indians is a very noble cause. But even Chief Waldron will tell you what he does through the Indian Council and for urban Indians, he's always paying deference to what the tribes say. First thing he'll tell you is, okay, go and get some documentation from your tribe and come back so that we have proof that you're an Indian from your tribe, not from the federal government. Don't go get a BIA. Who's your chief? Oh, you're over with Ray and them. Oh, okay, whose family are you? All right, yeah. It's that sort of thing that goes on. So I would be, with all of the urban Indians that are out there, orgs that are out there, you know, once again, has the Urban Indian Heritage Society reached out to these organizations to form relationships with them, to see what they're already doing that maybe they can support. With you know, there's genealogical services out there. There's individuals. I know specific individuals that have are I would say experts, but in particular family lines or particular tribal lineages. So, are you now saying that the Urban Indian Heritage Society is going to have authority, and their genealogy committee is going to have authority over um, Gail, who knows the Narragansett bloodlines, that everyone goes to and checks for the Narragansett bloodlines here in Rhode Island? Are they going to be able to override what she says? Like, it's just it appears to not acknowledge the work that's been going on. It appears to trample upon tribal sovereignty, and I'm hoping not, but it appears to be an attempt to access federal resources and supports that are specific to tribes without having to actually go through the tribe. And that's
there
just
it is.
That's problematic.
Very problematic.
That's problematic. That's problematic. That's once again, I'll ask. There's these groups that they were all in the newspaper maybe 4 or 5 years ago. They were like, they weren't Indians and they weren't Native Alaskans, but they were getting millions upon millions of dollars. And then, you know, they were saying, well, my such and such is this, that, the other. My question is this really much different than that? And if so, why? I hope it's not because of one's skin tone or the curl of one's hair or one's phenotype, because race isn't an indigenous concept. So why not just go and link and support what the Indians are already doing? Why the need to create something new and overstep everyone? Is the goal to establish relationships? If so, then I would say that it's going about it the wrong way. And if the goal is not to establish relationships, then I would say that that's not traditional, because that's, like you said, that starts wars. If we were back in the day and you wanted to go hunting and this was my people's territory and you just went hunting there without any relationship with us, without any communication, the reaction's going to be what it's going to be. So that same mindset, I think, needs to be relationship building, seeing what the needs are, and then seeing what can be contributed to address those needs. I don't think it's a situation where you say, my personal issues or concerns are more important than culture, tradition, or sovereignty, and I'm going to, without building any relationships, jump right to these people and tell them empower me over the rest of these people. That I don't think that that's a good issue, a good way to go about things. That Denzel Early, I think it is. Yeah. So the Wabash, I'm assuming that's a nation or a tribe, a tribal nation. It wouldn't necessarily be a clan. And Hemok Shelup is that guy. I don't even want to talk about him. He gets me in a bad mood. But yeah, just so and these once again are going to be just the little cultural nuances that'll let folks who are in the culture and who are associated with the traditions and all that know whether or not people actually know what they're talking about, because it goes beyond just the reading and all that. So if you're saying you're a Wabash, then the question would be, well, which clan from the Wabash are you? Okay, so Wabash is a confederacy. Okay, so then if it's a confederacy, a Wabash confederacy, then I'm going to want to know which nation you're from in that confederacy. The Wampanoag are a confederacy, but there's Mashpee, there's Aquinnah, there's Pocasset. You know what I'm saying? But they're all Wampanoag. And then if you really want to go back traditional enough, the Narragansetts are Wampanoags. All of the tribes that were fighting against the English during the King Philip's War are considered Wampanoags. Wampan means Eastern, and Og is plural, so Easterners. So just you know, having the language correct. And there you go. The brother's giving you some background right there. So, you know, the Wabash Indians were primarily the Miami, Wias, and Pinkashaws, but also included Kickapoos, Mascoutins, and others. In that time and place, Native American tribes were smaller political units. So this is what I'm saying. Like, even this just it's a great example of when you're dealing with people who know the culture and know the history, one little thing being off is gonna perk ears up and it's gonna call into question anything else that you're saying. So I always suggest to come with humility and to present what you're aware of, but seek understanding. So, you know, perhaps a better way would be, hey, you know, from my understanding, my people are Wabash, and this is what I know. Because then someone can say, oh, Wabash, once again, which nation? And then you could say, well, I'm not quite sure. Could you provide a little bit of explanation on that? It's always better to come, and I think that this is an issue with colonization as well. Americans come with this mindset of I know, and I'm gonna come tell you, and it's very contrary to how indigenous folks are. What you know, but you don't know everything. So you want to come to get understanding. Present what you know, but present it in a space where I'm seeking understanding to learn more.
Yeah, as I always, you never know who's listening. Who you talk about could be somebody that's from those very people amongst the crowd. So yeah, you always want to speak in a manner in which you're seeking information. Now, if you're taught to express yourself in such a, you know, I mean, that's a problem.
Yeah,
you know I mean, like, always got to be humble when you talking about this type stuff. You always got to be humble.
Yeah, and Turtle, to your point, that's why I only speak on my people.
Absolutely,
I can speak with confidence around my people. When it comes to the other folks, especially if they're not up in this Southeast region, hey, this is what I heard, or this is what was told to me, but I have to defer to what those folks say. I'm not going to get in an argument with someone around who their people are. I tell them what I heard or what I understand, but I'm because ain't no one going to come tell me about my people either. Very simple exchange and relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think this was a not to really cut things, but I think this was a I think anybody listening, whether they fans or not, whether they agree with us or not, I think if they're logical, they can see the error in what's been presented in that petition. And like I said, for me, it's not personal, but it's something that had to be addressed. Two Hawks, I thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
No, I just want to encourage everyone. We got family from our Delaware out in the Midwest, you know, and I think that this is a great example, right? Because even 5 years ago, there was a bunch of conflict going on. Sure. So, from a legal perspective, you asked me to touch base on this. From a legal perspective, and I'll share it in terms of the Nanhignuk. So, matter of fact, hold on 1 second. Let me pull up let me get right to the thing right here. 1 second. Let me read this. No sense in me. So I'm going to read what the legal definitions are. So an Indian nation is a large tribe of Indians or a group of affiliated tribes, as bear witness the Iroquois or the Haudenosaunee. An Indian tribe, a body of Indians united in a community under one leadership or government inhabiting a particular territory. So from that perspective, the nation is really the various tribes that are put together. Now, this is the way kind of we're organized. You have the nation, which is the Nanhignuk. But then you had tribes. So you had Showamets, Meshipogs, Nulakonkanits, Patuxets, but they were all considered Narragansetts. So Narragansett is this confederacy of this nation. The tribes are considered if you did in colonial terms, you have the state, and then you have the towns and cities that make up the state. When we go lower than that, you have the individual families that are within these different tribes. So you see how it builds, and then you have, but the larger families we would call clans, and then you have your individual families. So me and my wife and my 2 children are one family, but then my family and my cousin's family and my brother's family and my sister's family, that would be considered a clan. If we're all living in a particular area with other clans that are around, then we're all a part of this tribe. And then this tribe has this particular territory up here. So we're in Mashapog. All of these family clans are living in this Mashapog area. There, as the brother just put into the thing, there would be a chief from this particular area. So there would be a chief from Mashapog. There would be a chief from Showamet. There would be a chief from Patuxet, but they would represent all of the interests of the families that were in that region. So this is why you can't really just use these generic terms like, oh, I'm a Narragansett, because I'm going to ask you, well, from where? Who's your family? Because I'm trying to place you on where you're at. And like I said, I just read that's from American jurisprudence. The Europeans, when they arrived, they acknowledged, okay, this is how they're operating here. And actually, well, our people, we didn't even call it a confederacy, we called it a statendom. We have stations up here. So there's all of these it's like political, it's politics. It's all politics that's going on. As a matter of fact, when the Europeans were settling here, Pumham, who was the chief of Showamet, he had an issue that my Aunt Nomi allowed the Arnolds to use large swaths of land in his territory, which was Showamet. So he got together with Sokononiko, who was the chief of Patuxet, and they went up to Mass Bay. And they told Mass Bay, we don't agree with what my Aunt Nomi did, and we're not underneath him. I'm a big chief and myself, and we want a treaty with you. And then they formed a treaty with Mass Bay, and then Mass Bay came and attacked. So all of this is going on because of politics, but there were different voices for different areas, and there were always multiple big chiefs in our quote unquote nation, but they spoke on behalf of the Sagamores that were around. So when they ask what nation you're a part of, you want to not only be able to say, I'm a Narragansett, but I'm a Narragansett from Mashapog. Oh, okay. What's your family? Oh, I'm a Michael, I'm a Niles, and I'm a Champlin. And I've got some Harry blood too. See how that goes? Oh, okay. Oh, so are you related to? These are how the conversations go. Yeah, that's my such and such great grandfather. For me, Bristol Michael is my 3rd and 4th great grandfather, and there's a history behind that. But so your great grandfather was the one? Yes, there's a whole story that goes along with my bloodlines that I'm tied to. It's not just that I'm a Narragansett. I'm a Narragansett from here, who's from these bloodlines, who's tied to this history. And that's how, like I said, there's no questioning, there's no arguing, there's no none of that, because if you know the history, you're like, okay, that's who his people are. Yeah, he's one of us. When someone comes to me and says, oh, I'm a Choctaw, okay, from where? This is what I mean. This is always trying to do, so you don't really know who you are. And there you go. Sachem, Sakimas, yeah, just, switched a little bit. Then you had the Sagamores, who was, all politics, all within the language. But these are what traditional quote unquote Indians are looking for when they start to ask you these things. They're not asking you these things because, oh, you're too dark skinned, or they're asking you these things to see if they can figure out who your people are. And if I can't figure out who your people are, I'm not going to treat you like that's your people. You don't even know who your people are. Why would I treat you a certain way if you ain't treating yourself that certain way? So all of these misclassified Indians, my question to bring it just back again is, who are your people that you're misclassified from? And why are you not down there trying to build with them if those are your people? If those are your people, and this is the other thing that I kind of get a kick out of too. We're quick to call people immigrants, right? But if you're not in your traditional territories where your people's from, aren't you an immigrant then? Like if I'm not in the lands where I claim my people's from, aren't I an immigrant to other lands? But we don't think like that because we think we're all Americans. But that's a European concept. If I'm if I go across to the east side of Providence where I grew up at, I'm in Pokanoket territory. So I'm an immigrant in those lands traditionally because I'm a Narragansett. I'm across the river.
Yeah. And real quick, Denzel, let me just, real quick, just don't deal with it. He's not somebody that we recommend, nor someone that we, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We don't
Then
we don't want to get into all that, but we don't we don't deal with him at all.
He's one of those ones who's going to try to tell you about yourself generically based upon color and based upon Negroes was misclassified. And he's not an Indian.
Yeah. That's not to say your truth. Yeah. That's not to say your truth ain't your truth, but you need he's not somebody we would recommend you study anything under.
Yeah, he's
I'm
a
just
problem.
be honest with you.
Yeah, he's a problem, brother. There's a lot of good folks you can check out there, but my encouragement is always to be looking for your line specifically, who your people are directly, so that you can learn about yourself. Because Indian is this generic term. It really is just describing diverse peoples that have bloodlines that tie back to before these Europeans got here. And if you are able to trace your lineage and your history, it's going to tell you about who you are, which is going to help to direct you on the path that Creator has from you. I got so much more sharpened and direct on what I was supposed to be doing the more I learned about the experiences of my people. It helped me to understand myself more. It helped me understand why I am certain ways. It helped me understand how we even ended up where we were at in Providence. Because, hold on a second, the Indians are down on the reservation, aren't they? So why are we up here okay, after the detribalization, there was no work, so the whole family moved up to Providence. Okay, now what? So I have a more fulfilled understanding of who I am and what happened to my people, so I can speak with more clarity and more confidence now. And I don't need to speak about Indians generally. I don't need to talk about what the white man did. I don't need to talk about Walter Plecker. That has nothing to do with me. I can speak about what happened to me as a Narragansett in these lands, and I can speak about what my people went through, and I can hopefully link up with other Narragansetts or link up with other Pequots or other Nipmucks or the Lenapes, because we all share a very similar experience, and that's what the Federation was all about. These tribes and these tribes getting together because we all have similar experiences and saying, okay, this happened to my people, that happened to your people. Oh, okay. So there seems to be a shared sort of strategy that they've been utilizing on all of us. How do we put those pieces together to start to weave something that's beneficial for my tribe specifically and for our tribes collectively? And then how do we start to share that with other tribes who are in this same sort of predicament or have had these same experiences as us? So yeah, and much respect to you, brother, for acknowledging that there was an error on your part. Because I can't tell you how many people can't even do that. Can't even do that. Can't say they was wrong. How could they be wrong? I read this somewhere. How could I be wrong?
Yeah, just being open to, being open to growth. That's where what you seek is going. Like, you got to grow into what you seek. You know what I mean? That's what the journey is about.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And a lot of times growth comes from, accepting the error, you know what I'm saying, and moving through it. So
Man, that's the only way you grow. Accept your errors and move through it. Because you're gonna stay stagnant if you can't accept errors. You're gonna stay wrong.
Yeah. And it's like you're gonna make a lot of errors in your journey. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna make a lot of your errors in your journey, but you got to think about how you moving. How is this going to age? Can I look back on this in 10 years and feel good about the positions I was taking? You know what I'm saying? And I'd hate to see people, you know what I mean, be stuck in a place that people at right now in 10 years. You know what I mean? It's been long enough. You know what I mean? It's been about 5 years. I think it's time people really start to look at things in a more realistic manner. As I say before, like you could go buy you a plastic plant at a Home Depot, take it to a forest somewhere, plant it in the ground, and it's gonna look like the most beautiful tree in the forest. You come back in a year, it hasn't grown, it hasn't bared any fruit, and all the other trees have grown and bear fruit. It looked good for the moment, but see what happens when you come back in a year. See if it's grown, see if anything is grown out of it. And that's what's really going on with all of this misinformation. Nothing's going to be fruitful out of this. It's just going to get worse because they got to go deeper and deeper to try and find some type of justification. And now we're getting into conspiracies and getting to all this stuff. Next thing you know, there'd be alien shit. And on that note, I do want to say this. I got a guest coming up this week. Just, get a little light on this. Got a guest coming up this week that is actually an expert on UFO and all that history. Going to be very interesting. I'm gonna do something a little different. You know what I'm saying? He's an author, good friend of mine. I've known him actually for years. You know what I'm saying? So that's just like for anybody who's interested in that type of stuff, gonna have that type of conversation. And I will say, what's the what do you put before that? Just to let people know these are not my, you know what I'm saying? Like these are
Disclaimer.
not my. Yeah,
Disclaimer.
I'll do my disclaimer and everything, but I think it'll be interesting. He has an interesting angle on things. Brother named Rick Smith, the UFO teacher. So he's an old friend of mine. Gonna have a good conversation with him. But I just wanted to throw that out there. So but anyway, once again, like I said, bro, thank you for being here.
Oh yeah. My pleasure, Turtle. Always a pleasure to be on your platform and get the opportunity to share some thoughts with the people. And I hope it's beneficial and helps them move forward.
And truthfully, I hope that whoever's out there listening, you know what I'm saying, you really start to internalize some of these things. Start thinking about the stuff you're doing. Like, we really not here to keep y'all from achieving whatever goals you want. Just go about it the right way. You know what I mean? Like, there's people out here that's really putting in work to help heal. And, we don't want to see people out here working in a manner that's going to make this detrimental to everybody who's really trying to heal. It's a lot of good urban Indian organizations right here in New York. If you're in New York, there's an organization called the Urban Indigenous Collective. They're doing great things. You join that organization, you could volunteer. They're always looking for people to come be a part of what they're doing. You know what I mean? So I'm sure there's different organizations in your cities, in your community. You could join them. You could start making your way. You could start integrating and getting to meet people from different communities through these organizations. And next thing you know, you're starting to learn more about the culture, and you're meeting different people that can help you figure out what it is you're trying to figure out, who you are, all these things. But in the process, you're already starting to be a part of things. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's real simple. All you gotta do is say, you know what? Let me go down here and volunteer. And it starts just like that. You make new friends, and now you're a part of something that you just been reading in books about. Now you can just absorb and listen from actual people who are from these communities. So So yeah, anything else, bro? Anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think that's it. I don't think. Hold on. No, I'm cool. You know, glad we cleared a few things up. And I hope that gives some clarity just to some people. And once again, I just want to encourage everyone, like we've been saying from the very beginning, be very specific in your path. Learn about yourself and your people. No one can save everyone. That's not how this thing works. However, we can get together and unify to address what's collectively going on for everyone. But no one's going to be able to save everyone because everyone's narrative, everyone's experience, everyone's rights aren't the same. But if we all take our individual rights and experience and put them together, we can unify to address what's collectively going on. So, you know. Yeah.
And we want to give a shout out to Turtle Gang Midwest.
Yeah, shout
the
out,
moderator,
brother.
holding it down for us.
Stand and fight, brother.
Absolutely. We appreciate you. Still early enough going out there. Enjoy whatever sunlight you got left. I'm about to go spin the block a few times, get some fresh air. You know what I mean? Everybody else, thank you for joining in. And even to the people who it may seem like we really just trying to edify you. Like, I've been fair with you the whole time. Like, you know what it really is. You know what I'm saying? So, peace and blessings to everybody. And the Peach Canal.
Peace Ganache.